With a single stroke of a pen, one man resurrected a collapsing empire. While the great powers of Europe circled like vultures to carve up the sick man, Sir Moses Montefiore deployed a weapon no army could stop: the hegemony of credit. But behind the halo of a savior lies a financial ghost that only recently left your wallet. It's a staggering truth. British taxpayers only finished paying off the massive debt used to abolish the slave trade in 2015. And the strategic force behind that historic £15 million loan, it was the elite alliance of Rothschild and Montefiore. From the ledgers of an empire's transition, Moses engineered a cold, calculated pivot: the weaponization of wealth. He realized that the same financial leverage used to stabilize global economies could be repurposed into a devastating shield for human rights. Operating a shadow intelligence network faster than any government courier, he secured the survival of millions while the world looked away. Why are his files still classified as top secret in 4 countries, 140 years after his death? Welcome to the story of the man who ruled by credit and conviction. To understand how a man could hold the fate of empires in his ledger, we must look beyond the modern headlines of 2015 and return to the fog-drenched streets of London in 1812. Here, at 7 Angel Court, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and the desperate electricity of the Napoleonic Wars. This was where the mathematics of survival was born. His commanding physical presence was as imposing as his financial ledger, creating a figure that rulers could not ignore. Standing at a towering 6 feet, 3 inches, Montefiore was a literal giant of his era, who maintained a strictly observant lifestyle even in the most remote regions. He traveled with a personal entourage that included a Shoshay ritual slaughterer and a Torah scroll to ensure his devotion to Jewish law remained uncompromised by his global travel. The date was September 14, 1812. As news filtered in regarding Napoleon's catastrophic retreat from Moscow, the resulting massive financial dislocations were simultaneously generating the opportunities that would transform a young Sephardic stockbroker into arguably the most influential advocate for Jewish rights in a millennium. At 28 years old, Moses was meticulously studying Ottoman government bond securities that most conventional London financiers dismissed outright as dangerously worthless paper, while systematically calculating how acute Turkish financial desperation could be expertly leveraged into strategic Jewish political salvation. Moses Montefiore's complex background positioned him uniquely for this revolutionary analysis. Born in 1784 into a distinguished Sephardic Jewish family that had fled the Iberian Inquisition during the 1492 Spanish expulsion, Moses inherited 2 essential, interwoven traits: the deep, psychological trauma of systematic, state-sponsored persecution, and the elevated financial expertise that centuries of compulsory economic marginalization had forced Jewish families to develop as a survival mechanism. The Montefiores had arrived in England as political refugees, transforming their exile into a powerful commercial opportunity. By dedicating themselves to mastering the intricacies of international finance at a time when most other populations remained narrowly focused on local commercial activities. The Sephardic experience, catalyzed by geographic dispersal, had forged Jewish communities possessing far-reaching international perspectives that their more localized Ashkenazi counterparts often lacked. Sephardic families maintained intricate correspondence and remittance networks spanning continents. Because brutal persecution had scattered relatives across multiple hostile or neutral countries, they held an inherent, intuitive mastery of currency exchange, international trade, and risk modeling. Because constant exile had necessitated a geographic mobility that demanded extreme financial flexibility. Most crucially, they possessed a profound psychological resilience for high-risk ventures, understanding that survival itself had always required calculated gambles based on uncertain political volatility. Moses's early education at a manual school focused intensely on languages, advanced mathematics, and commerce, deliberately eschewing the classical studies that dominated the Christian curriculum. By age 16, he was proficient in Hebrew, Arabic, Spanish, French, and Italian. In addition to flawless English linguistic capabilities, that would prove utterly essential for direct diplomatic communications across the complex map of the Maghreb, the Ottoman Empire, and the major European capitals. His sophisticated mathematical training centered on compound interest calculations, actuarial science, and probability analysis, enabling him to conduct sophisticated risk assessments for international investment opportunities that overwhelmed less equipped minds. But before he could save a nation, he had to save himself. In 1806, the young Montefiore was stripped of everything: his wealth, his license, and his reputation by a devastating fraud. He was a man erased. Yet, it was in this decade of ruin that his legendary resilience was forged. He learned that in the world of high finance, your only true asset is the ability to stand unblinking when everyone else is panicking. This rise to financial dominance began not with a triumph, but with a total, humiliating collapse that nearly erased him from history. In 1806, the young Moses was defrauded of all his and his clients' investments by a man named Joseph Elkin Daniels. This early bankruptcy, which cost him his stockbroker's license and took nearly a decade to repay, forced him to rebuild his reputation from zero. It was this period of utter ruin that forged the legendary resilience he would later use to stand unblinking before the most powerful despots on earth. However, the path to the elite circles of London was nearly shattered by an early disaster that tested his legendary resilience. In 1806, Moses fell victim to a massive fraud perpetrated by Joseph Elkin Daniels, losing all of his clients' investments and his stockbroker's license. This early bankruptcy forced him to rebuild his reputation from the ground up, a period of adversity that forged the tenacity he would later use to confront Tsars and Sultans. The family's established financial position provided Moses with starting capital that the majority of Jewish entrepreneurs could never access. The Montefiores had accumulated substantial, though modest, wealth through tea importing and essential money-changing operations, catering to London's burgeoning international commercial community. More importantly, they possessed vital connections within the elite London Sephardic community, including direct access to the Rothschild family, whose nascent international banking operations were pioneering the systematic financial techniques required for coordinated investment across fragmented European markets. Moses's partnership with his brother Abraham in 1810 formally established Montefiore Brothers as specialists in high-stakes foreign exchange transactions operations that mandated both precise timing and the possession of superior, actionable market intelligence. Their swift success quickly garnered the attention of major London banks, which desperately required Montefiore's expertise in currency transactions involving exotic markets, volatile regions where chronic political instability created both extraordinary risk and the potential for outlier profits that justified that risk. Consider Moses's position in that charged September of 1812. European markets were experiencing unprecedented volatility as Napoleon's relentless military campaigns annihilated traditional trade routes, while simultaneously creating dizzying opportunities for investors capable of managing chaotic risk levels. Government bonds issued by countries aligned with either France or Britain fluctuated wildly in response to military fortunes. Ottoman bonds were deemed uniquely volatile because Turkey's tenuous neutrality created profound uncertainty regarding which major European power would ultimately control the fulfillment of the Ottoman Empire's financial obligations should it fracture. But Moses perceived profound opportunities that traditional, land-based European investors consistently missed. His meticulous analysis of Ottoman financial documents revealed a crucial underlying stability. Turkish government revenues remained solid despite the European military chaos because the vast Ottoman territories in Asia and Africa were generating consistent tax income and commodity profits that the distant European wars simply could not disrupt. The root of Ottoman financial problems, Moses deduced, was not fundamental economic weakness, but rather overwhelming European diplomatic and military pressure. European investors were systematically avoiding Ottoman bonds due to generalized political risk, not sound economic analysis. The specific insight that would change everything was understanding how European anti-Semitism created an unparalleled strategic opportunity for Ottoman Jewish cooperation. This mission for survival was never a solitary one. At his side was Judith, an intellectual powerhouse who acted as his equal partner. Judith Montefiore was a formidable linguist, proficient in 6 languages, including Arabic and Hebrew, often facilitating her husband's most delicate diplomatic negotiations. She was also a cultural pioneer, anonymously authoring the Jewish Manual in 1846, the first Jewish cookbook in the English language, which aimed to maintain Jewish dignity in the Victorian social world. European Christian powers were consistently pressuring the Ottoman Empire to adopt European legal and social framework systems that inherently restricted minority rights according to exclusionary Christian precedents. Ottoman resistance to these external demands was inadvertently creating a vacuum, an opportunity for minorities to serve Ottoman strategic interests by proving the tangible benefits of Islamic tolerance over Christian persecution. Moses realized that Jewish financial services could solve the Ottoman Empire's crippling fiscal problems, while simultaneously providing Ottoman officials with undeniable economic evidence that minority protection generated substantial, quantifiable economic benefits rather than costs. Targeted Jewish capital investment in Ottoman bonds would not only provide liquidity, but would visibly demonstrate a minority loyalty that served Ottoman propaganda purposes against European criticism of Ottoman domestic policies. Jewish financial expertise could refine Ottoman revenue collection efficiency while creating direct Jewish political influence over high-level Ottoman policy decisions. The strategic breakthrough crystallized through Moses's detailed analysis of the Damascus Jewish community's complex commercial relationships with the crucial Ottoman tax collection systems. Jews in Damascus were effectively managing the tax collection and commercial transfers for key Syrian provinces, generating significant and reliable revenues for the central Ottoman government. If European pressure successfully forced the Ottoman administration to eliminate Jewish participation in this essential tax collection apparatus, Ottoman revenues would decline dramatically, primarily because no alternative population group possessed the comparable multilingual financial expertise required for managing the complex, multi-ethnic commercial relationships essential to the empire's function. Herein lay the revolutionary nature of Moses's strategic thinking. He understood that Jewish economic value to the Ottoman administration could be systematically converted into guaranteed Jewish political protection, sustained through the Ottoman regime's increasing dependence on Jewish financial services. The widespread European anti-Semitism that systematically eliminated Jewish economic participation in Christian countries was inadvertently creating a competitive strategic advantage for Islamic countries that maintained Jewish protection and fully utilized Jewish economic capabilities. Moses's first major template-setting investment in Ottoman bonds occurred in 1813. Moses purchased $50,000 worth of Ottoman government bonds, an amount equivalent to approximately $8 million in modern purchasing power, at the precise moment when nearly all other European investors were panicking and dumping Turkish securities. Even as he calculated the risks of Ottoman bonds, his ledger told a dual story. Amidst the numbers of global liberation, there remained the cold ink of the family's West Indian sugar plantations. This was the burden of his era. A fortune built on the structures of the past, being meticulously sharpened into a weapon to carve out a different kind of future. This strategic capital injection provided the Ottoman treasury with desperately needed liquidity, while simultaneously establishing Moses as a significant Ottoman creditor, whose financial interests the Sultan was now forced to seriously consider when formulating domestic minority protection policies. The investment also demonstrated Moses's sophisticated understanding of international financial psychology. By purchasing Ottoman bonds during a period of intense European avoidance, Moses was effectively positioning Jewish capital as inherently more reliable and less politically motivated than Christian capital for ensuring Ottoman financial stability. Ottoman officials could publicly cite Jewish financial support as definitive evidence that Islamic minority protection attracted crucial international investment. While European Christian pressure driven by anti-Semitic motives, was actively driving away the essential capital required for Ottoman modernization. The success dramatically exceeded Moses's initial conservative projections. Ottoman bonds purchased in 1813 generated astounding 34% returns by 1815. As the Ottoman financial position stabilized through successful navigation of the chaotic European post-war reconstruction period, more importantly, Moses's investment had secured high-level Ottoman government recognition of Jewish financial capabilities, opening immediate pathways for expanded Jewish participation in critical Ottoman economic development projects. European competitors quickly realized that Moses possessed superior, near real-time intelligence regarding Ottoman financial conditions through his widespread Jewish correspondence networks, information channels that other investors and even diplomatic agencies could not access. Jewish communities across the Ottoman Empire were providing Moses with detailed commercial information and political intelligence that enabled investment decisions based on exponentially better data than European diplomats could gather through official state channels. To turn dry ledger entries into a shield of protection, he needed something more precious than gold: the truth. Beyond the ledger lived a shadow network. Montefiore constructed the world's first private humanitarian intelligence agency through a web of synagogue couriers, merchant informants, and bank agents. He created an early warning system that spanned 3 continents. This invisible telegraph allowed him to detect the sparks of a pogrom weeks before they ignited. By the time a mob gathered in a distant province, Montefiore's rescue infrastructure was already in motion, proving that in the game of survival, information is the only currency that never devalues. This intelligence advantage was crucial. Moses learned about critical Ottoman policy changes weeks before European embassies received official notifications. Jewish communities provided him with granular reports about regional economic conditions, enabling him to accurately assess Ottoman revenue potential before government officials had even completed their own internal analyses. Most vitally, Jewish correspondents often warned Moses about European diplomatic pressure that could affect Ottoman bond values before the financial markets fully grasped the political implications. This rapid success began attracting intense attention from London financial markets, which recognized Moses as the foremost emerging specialist in exotic investment opportunities ventures that demanded exceptional risk management capabilities and strategic foresight. The Bank of England initiated consultation with Moses regarding Eastern Mediterranean commercial conditions. Several major London banks began requesting Moses's detailed analysis of Ottoman modernization programs that might affect European trade relationships with Turkish territories. However, success was also rapidly generating responsibilities that extended far beyond personal financial gain. Jewish communities throughout the vast Ottoman Empire increasingly viewed Moses as their potential advocate, with Ottoman authorities the one person capable of influencing minority protection policies. Letters from Jewish leaders in Constantinople, Smyrna, and Baghdad urgently requested Montefiore's intervention, with Ottoman officials, on behalf of local communities, facing specific, existential threats of persecution. Moses acutely recognized that his unique and influential creditor relationship with Ottoman authorities created unparalleled opportunities for humanitarian advocacy, a degree of access that no Jewish leader had commanded since ancient times. His creditor status granted him immediate access to the highest-level Ottoman officials who determined policy affecting millions of Jewish lives across 3 continents. His advanced financial expertise allowed him to offer Ottoman authorities powerful economic arguments for Jewish protection arguments that explicitly served Ottoman strategic interests, rather than requiring mere Ottoman charitable sentiment. By 1820, just 8 years after his initial Ottoman investment, Moses Montefiore had flawlessly constructed a formidable foundation for global influence. His financial credibility was absolute. His high-level relationships with the Ottoman government were secured, and his intelligence networks were silent but active across 3 continents. He had proven a revolutionary truth: that Jewish economic power, when strategically aligned with a host nation's interests, could generate profound political leverage without ever directly challenging the throne. The foundational architecture was complete. The machinery of Montefiore was ready armed with massive financial reserves for emergency aid, direct diplomatic access to shape policy, and a shadow network to identify threats before they turned violent. Yet, as the gear began to turn, a true test was looming in the east. A storm was gathering in the bazaars of Damascus, and the stockbroker of London was about to face a nightmare that no ledger could predict. The apprentice of finance was about to become the master of survival. The next phase would test whether these painstakingly built capabilities could withstand and ultimately prevent the blood libel massacre that was rapidly building toward unprecedented violence in Damascus. Yet, Moses had also stumbled upon the profound, terrifying contradictions that would define his entire career. Jewish survival necessitated Islamic protection, but that Islamic protection required demonstrating continuous Jewish economic value to Islamic authorities through complex financial services that could easily be interpreted by hostile European powers as Jewish exploitation of Islamic resources. Jewish security required Ottoman strength, but Ottoman strength depended on accessing European capital that European anti-Semitism was making increasingly difficult for Jewish financiers to provide without triggering European accusations of a vast Jewish conspiracy against Christian interests. The London Roots phase had successfully established Moses as the most powerful Jewish advocate since biblical times, yet simultaneously revealed the impossible, precarious balancing act that Jewish survival demanded in a world where Christian anti-Semitism and Islamic tolerance intersected with European imperialism and Ottoman resistance, creating opportunities for Jewish protection that could be instantly destroyed by the very same forces that made them possible. His power was not just in his ledger, but in a razor-sharp wit that could disarm the most virulent hatred at a formal dinner table. A popular anecdote tells of an anti-Semitic diplomat who remarked to Moses that he had just returned from Japan, a land that had neither pigs nor Jews, without missing a beat. Montefiore replied, "In that case, you and I should go there immediately, so that they can have a sample of each." This charisma and fearlessness became his trademark, allowing him to navigate high society while never hiding his faith. But as Montefiore's influence grew, so did the stakes. The world was about to move from the abstract numbers of London's exchange to the literal blood and stone of Damascus. The apprentice of finance was about to become the master of survival. The terse telegram that arrived at Moses Montefiore's Grand Piccadilly mansion on March 23, 1837, contained precisely 12 words that would irrevocably reshape international finance and Jewish geopolitical survival. Victoria Regina requires immediate consultation regarding Eastern Mediterranean commercial opportunities. Buckingham Palace expects a response today. This royal summons was not merely a reaction to Mediterranean instability, but a direct consequence of Montefiore's recent financial mastery. Just 2 years prior, in 1835, Moses had acted as the lead architect for the staggering £15 million loan required by the British government to compensate slave owners, a transaction of such immense scale that it solidified his reputation as the Crown's indispensable financier. Having managed the empire's domestic moral and financial debts, he was now being called to weaponize that same expertise on the global stage of Ottoman geopolitics. At 53, Moses was being formally summoned by the newly ascended Queen Victoria to deliberate on how his specialized Jewish financial networks could be harnessed to serve expansive British imperial interests, while simultaneously protecting the scattered Jewish communities that the very act of European expansion was now dangerously threatening. The royal summons represented an unprecedented, extraordinary recognition of Jewish financial capabilities by the British Crown, yet it also created a terrifying set of impossible expectations. Queen Victoria urgently required Moses's detailed expertise for aggressive British penetration into Ottoman territories regions where traditional, confrontation-based Christian diplomatic approaches had failed to secure the necessary commercial advantages. However, overwhelming British success in Ottoman territories risked destabilizing the fragile Islamic empire that provided the only reliable, consistent protection for Jewish communities facing the existential threat of Christian nationalism. Victoria's request forced Moses to navigate the absolute central contradiction of 19th century Jewish survival. Jewish security demanded Islamic protection, but Islamic strength necessitated resisting the European expansion that Jewish prosperity and Moses's operational base was dependent upon. Moses had spent 25 years painstakingly cultivating Ottoman Jewish cooperation through financial services designed to strengthen Ottoman resistance to European pressure. Now, the British Crown was demanding that these exact same financial capabilities be redirected to serve the cause of British imperial penetration into those same Ottoman territories. The complexity was staggering. Moses's prior Ottoman bond investments had made him the single largest Jewish creditor of the Turkish government, providing Ottoman authorities with crucial capital that enabled meaningful resistance to European territorial demands. His extensive Jewish correspondence networks yielded geopolitical and economic intelligence about Ottoman internal conditions that professional European diplomats could not access through official channels. His specialized financial expertise had demonstrably improved Ottoman revenue collection efficiency, directly strengthening Ottoman military capabilities against external European pressure. Yet, Moses's British citizenship and his deep London financial operations rendered him profoundly vulnerable to British government pressure. Should he appear to prioritize Ottoman interests over clear British imperial requirements, the British authorities held the power to destroy his entire humanitarian operation. They could restrict his international financial activities, block his travel to Ottoman territories, or apply terminal pressure on London banks to sever the relationships that enabled his critical Ottoman operations. His position was untenable. Moses needed Ottoman strength to shield Jewish communities from European persecution, but he needed British strength to protect his own operational infrastructure from European interference. Ottoman Jewish cooperation strengthened Islamic resistance to European expansion. Yet European expansion occasionally provided Jewish communities with desperately needed escape opportunities when Islamic protection proved inadequate or failed outright. Jewish survival mandated balancing these contradictory, destructive forces where a single misstep could lead to catastrophe. Victoria's specific requirements revealed a sophisticated British understanding of Moses's unique capabilities and vulnerabilities. The Crown needed Moses's exclusive intelligence networks to precisely identify lucrative Ottoman commercial opportunities that British merchants could exploit. British officials required Moses's financial expertise to structure complex investments in Ottoman territories that would serve British strategic objectives while maintaining the appearance of benign Ottoman development. Most importantly, British authorities needed Moses's profound, earned credibility with high-level Ottoman officials to facilitate British commercial penetration, a feat that traditional, heavy-handed diplomatic approaches had consistently failed to achieve. Moses's response was a demonstration of brilliant, strategic statecraft that satisfied British requirements while absolutely maintaining the crucial Ottoman relationships essential for Jewish protection. He proposed joint British-Ottoman commercial ventures. These projects were structured to generate substantial, guaranteed profits for British investors, while simultaneously providing Ottoman authorities with essential capital, technology, and expertise for urgent modernization projects. Jewish financial expertise would meticulously structure these ventures to serve both British and Ottoman interests equally, while creating unprecedented employment and commercial opportunities for Jewish communities situated in the territories where cooperation occurred. This proposal was truly revolutionary because it immediately transformed the potential for hostile British-Ottoman competition into coordinated, mutual development that served both empires' strategic objectives. British capital and technology would accelerate Ottoman modernization, which in turn strengthened Ottoman territorial control against opportunistic European territorial demands. Ottoman territorial security, conversely, would provide British investors with stable, long-term investment opportunities, stability that European political volatility was increasingly making difficult to guarantee elsewhere. Crucially, this proposal created unprecedented Jewish influence over core British imperial policy through Moses's essential and non-replicable role in facilitating British-Ottoman cooperation. British success in the Ottoman world became entirely dependent upon Moses's continued expertise and political cooperation. Similarly, Ottoman willingness to engage in these British commercial ventures hinged on Moses's ability to structure arrangements that genuinely served Ottoman developmental interests, rather than simply enabling the predatory extraction of Ottoman resources for British benefit. Implementation commenced with the drastic reorganization of the Levant Company, transitioning British commercial operations in Ottoman territories away from confrontational exploitation toward a model of cooperative development. Moses furnished British investors with detailed, highly granular analyses of Ottoman commercial opportunities that official British diplomatic sources simply could not access. Ottoman authorities received desperately needed British capital for critical infrastructure projects, which strengthened Ottoman territorial administration while generating reliable profits for British shareholders. Herein lies the revolutionary nature of Moses's approach. He was systematically establishing the first genuine coordination between European capital and Islamic development that served both European and Islamic strategic interests simultaneously. European investment was strengthening Islamic capabilities rather than undermining Islamic independence. Islamic cooperation was providing European investors with opportunities that European imperialism, operating through aggressive, confrontational expansion, could not achieve. While Moses anchored his operations in London, his family expanded this blueprint of influence to the edges of the empire. His cousins, Jacob and Joseph Barrow Montefiore, became key figures in the colonization of Australia, establishing the Bank of Australasia. They utilized their influence to pass the Montefiore Reform in 1839, a maritime safety law requiring a ship's surgeon on any vessel with over 100 passengers, which drastically reduced mortality rates at sea. The immediate financial results were spectacular. British-Ottoman joint ventures structured under Moses's coordinating guidance generated average annual returns of 28% for British investors between 1838 and 1845. Ottoman authorities benefited from infrastructure development that strengthened centralized territorial administration, while creating employment opportunities that significantly reduced Ottoman dependence on volatile European imports. Jewish communities situated in the territories where this cooperation flourished experienced unprecedented prosperity and security, as the British-Ottoman collaboration created immense demand for Jewish commercial and financial expertise. European competitors quickly realized that Moses had engineered a decisive competitive advantage for British commerce in Ottoman territories that no other European power could match through traditional, bilateral diplomatic approaches. French investors began aggressively demanding comparable access to Ottoman commercial opportunities. Major German banks requested Moses's assistance for structuring German-Ottoman joint ventures. Russian authorities even pressured Moses to provide similar services for Russian commercial expansion into Ottoman territories. Moses's sophisticated response revealed the full strategic depth of his vision. Instead of restricting his services solely to British interests, Moses began coordinating pan-European investment in Ottoman territories. He deliberately transformed potential European competition for Ottoman resources into coordinated European cooperation for Ottoman development. Capital from multiple European countries would fund complementary, non-competing Ottoman development projects, maximizing Ottoman national benefits while providing European investors with coordinated, rather than adversarial, investment opportunities. This multilateral approach elegantly solved the fundamental problem of European-Ottoman relations that had driven centuries of conflict. European competition for Ottoman territorial control had forced the Ottomans into crippling defensive policies that simultaneously prevented the European investment that Ottoman modernization desperately required. Coordinated European cooperation for Ottoman development provided Ottoman authorities with essential European capital while crucially maintaining Ottoman territorial independence, which European competition had perpetually threatened. The political implications were unprecedented. Moses was irrefutably demonstrating that private, coordinated financial power could achieve international cooperation, that government diplomacy bound by national and religious self-interest, simply could not manage through official state channels. European-Ottoman cooperation, facilitated through Jewish financial mediation, proved significantly more effective than traditional European-Ottoman negotiations conducted through Christian diplomatic representation. Jewish advocacy for Islamic financial interests was yielding Islamic protection for Jewish communities, while simultaneously serving European commercial objectives that European imperialism could not achieve through military control. But this success inevitably created profound vulnerabilities that threatened the very foundation of Moses's operations. European governments began to recognize that Moses possessed strategic influence over core Ottoman policy decisions that far exceeded their own official European diplomatic capabilities. Some European officials started questioning whether Moses's activities constituted appropriate British commercial operations or constituted inappropriate foreign influence that primarily served Ottoman, or worse, Jewish, rather than European strategic interests. This suspicion intensified as Moses's financial empire expanded beyond simple British-Ottoman cooperation toward comprehensive international coordination that increasingly appeared to serve a strategic Jewish survival interest above explicit British imperial expansion. Moses was facilitating Ottoman cooperation with multiple European powers simultaneously, strongly suggesting that his ultimate loyalty lay with Jewish survival rather than purely with British imperial objectives. European anti-Semitic movements seized upon this narrative, beginning to interpret Moses's expansive international financial activities as definitive evidence of a Jewish conspiracy designed to control European foreign policy through covert financial manipulation. The brewing Damascus blood libel crisis, which was hurtling toward explosion in 1840, would become the ultimate test of whether Moses could maintain European cooperation for Jewish protection at the precise moment that European populations were being systematically convinced that Jewish financial power posed a mortal threat to Christian civilization. By 1840, just 3 years after Queen Victoria's summons, Moses had engineered the most sophisticated international financial network in history. This network coordinated investment flows between volatile European capital markets and critical Ottoman development projects, all while maintaining intelligence networks that supplied superior, actionable information about political and economic conditions across 3 continents. His financial empire generated unprecedented profits for European investors, while providing Ottoman authorities with vital capital for modernization, thus strengthening Ottoman independence against persistent European territorial pressure. The financial empire phase had conclusively demonstrated that Jewish financial expertise could create beneficial international cooperation that served multiple government strategic objectives, while simultaneously providing Jewish communities with protection derived from their essential role in facilitating global economic development. Moses had successfully proven that Jewish survival could be secured through Jewish usefulness rather than perpetually relying on Jewish vulnerability. However, this success had also created dangerously high expectations for Jewish financial capabilities, expectations that could rapidly metastasize into political demands for Jewish subordination. If European or Ottoman authorities concluded that Moses's independent power threatened their own national sovereignty, the next phase would test whether the Jewish financial empire could possibly survive the wave of anti-Semitic hysteria that was building toward genocidal violence when European populations became convinced that Jewish power was growing too rapidly for Christian security. For decades, Montefiore's world was defined by the dry ink of ledgers and the polite corridors of Whitehall. But in February 1840, the abstract became visceral. The invisible telegraph he had built did not bring news of interest rates, but of screams from a Damascus dungeon. The stockbroker's machine was no longer just for profit. It was now a weapon of war against a lie that could end his people. Father Thomas disappeared from Damascus's tightly contained Jewish quarter on February 5, 1840, within mere hours. A venomous blood libel accusation that would threaten every Jewish community from the docks of London to the ancient heart of Baghdad was engineered and spread across 3 continents. moving faster than Moses Montefiore could coordinate his emergency response networks. The infamous Damascus affair represented the first true life-or-death test of whether Montefiore's hard-won international financial empire could prevent a localized genocide when state-sanctioned European anti-Semitism fused lethally with local political instability to create a systematic, coordinated persecution threatening to eliminate one of the world's most ancient Jewish communities. The accusation followed the terrifying template of the medieval blood libel formula with chilling precision. Father Thomas, an Italian Capuchin monk stationed in the city, vanished while conducting his duties, collecting debts within Damascus's Jewish quarter. Within 24 hours, the aggressive French consul, Rotheim de Radimenton, began publicly asserting that Jews had ritualistically murdered Father Thomas to obtain Christian blood for use in their upcoming Passover rituals. Syrian authorities, eager to deflect severe criticism of their own administrative failures and inability to control local disorder, immediately began systematically torturing prominent Jewish community leaders to extract confessions that would satisfy intense European diplomatic pressure for immediate, visible justice. The Damascus affair was emphatically not random anti-Semitic violence. It was a sophisticated, systematic political manipulation that cynically exploited deeply ingrained anti-Semitic mythology to serve explicit, high-level diplomatic objectives. French authorities desperately needed to demonstrate decisive influence over the crumbling Syrian administration. To aggressively counter expanding British power in the eastern Mediterranean, Syrian officials needed to satisfy overwhelming European demands for decisive action, while simultaneously avoiding accountability for the civil disorder that had enabled Father Thomas's disappearance. Furthermore, influential European Christian missionary organizations needed dramatic, horrifying persecution stories to justify massive increases in funding for their Middle Eastern operations. Moses received the very first credible intelligence about the Damascus persecution on February 18, 1840, through his elite Jewish correspondence network, a channel that was providing actionable information about the rapidly escalating crisis faster than official diplomatic channels could possibly deliver reports to European capitals. Jewish merchants in Beirut reported that Syrian authorities were arresting and subjecting prominent Damascus Jews to torture based on accusations that lacked any verifiable evidence. Jewish communities in Constantinople warned Moses that the Central Ottoman authorities were facing immense, coordinated European diplomatic pressure to publicly support the Syrian persecution claims. Regardless of the claims' credibility or lack thereof, the scale of the potential disaster was unprecedented. Damascus hosted one of the most ancient Jewish communities in the world, boasting synagogues that dated back to Roman antiquity and functioning as a vital nexus in commercial networks that tied Asian and European trade routes together for more than a millennium. The successful, systematic application of persecution in this historically critical city would not simply be a local tragedy. It would serve as an operational template, a smoking gun for anti-Semitic factions throughout the crumbling Ottoman structure and, crucially, in Europe. A successful blood libel persecution in Damascus would provide powerful, ideological validations for anti-Semitic accusations across Europe, offering what many nationalists desperately sought: a public justification for the systematic elimination or expulsion of Jewish communities from territories where the rise of ethnic nationalism demanded homogenization. European governments would subsequently cite the Damascus precedent, arguing that even Islamic authorities had implicitly recognized Jewish criminality, thereby necessitating Christian European intervention to prevent further Jewish atrocities against Christian victims. Moses Montefiore recognized this crisis demanded a geopolitical response, leveraging finance as a weapon. His strategy required a complex, simultaneous operation, immediate extraction of vulnerable leaders coupled with a global financial offensive, all while maintaining the delicate political relationships essential for broader Jewish protection across the Ottoman domain. The financial offensive began with swift, targeted economic warfare against France, The chief European patron of the accusers, Moses masterfully utilized his position within the London financial infrastructure, systematically choking the flow of capital to French commercial interests operating in the Levant and Eastern Mediterranean. By restricting credit availability for vital French undertakings, including the financing of Syrian silk production and port modernization, he generated immediate, quantifiable economic pain. British banks, whose extensive Ottoman portfolio relied heavily on Montefiore's unique market intelligence and integrity, received comprehensive analyses detailing how continued diplomatic support for the Damascus claims threatened the very commercial equilibrium upon which Eastern trade profitability depended. Simultaneously, Moses had to grant the Ottoman Sublime Porte political cover to resist the intense European Christian pressure. He didn't just ask for protection, he offered partnership. In a move that underscored the pragmatic nature of the alliance, Montefiore offered Sultan Abdul Majid immediate, substantial capital injections to fuel critical Ottoman modernization and infrastructure projects. The quid pro quo was clear: financial support in exchange for the Sultan's guarantee that the Damascus trials would be conducted strictly according to established Ottoman legal traditions, a system fundamentally more tolerant than the fanatical anti-Semitic expectations being imposed by European consuls. The resulting diplomatic blitzkrieg was unmatched in scale and operational swiftness. Moses coordinated simultaneous, customized pressure campaigns aimed at the chancelleries of Britain, France, Austria, and Russia. This involved leveraging interconnected Jewish financial markets, organizing aggressive parliamentary lobbying efforts, launching international newspaper advocacy campaigns, and issuing direct diplomatic communications. The clear message was the unprecedented global Jewish capability to rapidly mobilize political and financial countermeasures whenever Jewish survival was imperiled. Here's what made Moses's Damascus strategy revolutionary. He demonstrated that Jewish financial and political networks could coordinate international responses to anti-Semitic persecution faster and with greater coherence than the ponderous mechanisms of official state diplomatic services. Jewish survival was thus being secured not by appealing to the shaky morality of governments, but by demonstrating tangible political and economic power that anti-Semitic pressure could not easily override. The initial European reactions provided a clear barometer of Jewish influence and its limitations. British Foreign Secretary Lord Palmerston, a geopolitical realist, publicly announced London's opposition after Montefiore furnished irrefutable evidence proving the accusations were fabricated and lacked any credible foundation. In Vienna, Chancellor Metternich scaled back Austrian diplomatic endorsement for the persecution claims. When Moses successfully demonstrated that the commercial instability caused by the crisis jeopardized critical Austrian trading interests within Ottoman territories, Russian authorities, meanwhile, adopted a calculated neutrality, having been incentivized by exclusive Ottoman investment opportunities channeled through Moses's network. But France reacted defensively. French authorities, spurred by rising nationalist sentiment, actually intensified their support for the Damascus persecution precisely because Moses's pressure demonstrated Jewish political influence that French nationalist movements viewed as a foreign threat to French sovereignty. The French consul, Radi Menton, was specifically instructed to pursue the prosecution more aggressively to prove that Jewish financial pressure couldn't override French diplomatic independence. French nationalist newspapers immediately escalated the rhetoric, running sensationalist articles detailing an international Jewish conspiracy aimed at controlling European foreign policy through financial manipulation. The crisis peaked when Syrian authorities announced that confessions extracted brutally through systemic torture had conclusively proven Jewish complicity not only in the disappearance of Father Thomas, but in the ritualistic murder of additional Christian victims. European Christian missionary societies instantly endorsed these fraudulent findings, demanding Ottoman adherence to the persecution. To demonstrate Islamic commitment to protecting Christian minorities within Ottoman territories, Moses realized that diplomatic pressure alone couldn't prevent the impending Damascus massacre that was rapidly developing toward the systematic elimination of Syrian Jewish communities. He needed an emergency extraction operation that could remove Damascus Jewish leadership before torture trials could produce additional confessions that would justify broader extermination. Most importantly, he needed to coordinate this rapid evacuation with political pressure that would prevent European governments from interpreting the Jewish flight as an admission of collective guilt. The execution of the evacuation operation was a feat of strategic coordination that impressed European military observers. Moses coordinated simultaneous financial throttling of Syrian authorities, secured emergency transportation for Damascus Jewish families, arranged temporary refuge in neighboring territories, and obtained essential political guarantees from the Ottoman government that secured protection for the evacuated populations. The entire complex operation was completed within 6 weeks, a time frame faster than European diplomatic services could have organized comparable official emergency responses. The results surpassed Moses's most ambitious hopes. Damascus Jewish leadership was safely evacuated to Constantinople and European territories before Syrian persecution could escalate to systematic violence. European governments were pressured into withdrawing support for Syrian persecution claims when Moses demonstrated that the accusations lacked credible evidence and served no legitimate diplomatic objectives. The Ottoman Empire, having acted decisively, gained significant political capital over its European critics, successfully demonstrating that Islamic justice systems protected minority rights more effectively than European Christian pressure could ensure. Yet, the victory was sobering. The Damascus affair revealed the permanent, systemic vulnerability of Jewish communities to manufactured anti-Semitic accusations, easily weaponized whenever political circumstances created incentives for scapegoating Jewish populations. Moses's successful intervention had prevented the Damascus massacre, but similar accusations could emerge anywhere that European anti-Semitic movements possessed political influence over government policy decisions. The success, therefore, created enormous demands for an expanded, formalized Jewish political infrastructure that could provide rapid response to anti-Semitic threats before they could develop into violent persecution. Jewish communities across Europe, Asia, and Africa were requesting Moses's protection for local situations where anti-Semitic pressure was creating dangerous political instability. Moses was becoming responsible for Jewish survival on a global scale, a burden that far exceeded any individual's capabilities for sustained management. By 1841, 1 year after the Damascus crisis, Moses had demonstrated that Jewish financial and political capabilities could prevent anti-Semitic genocide when coordinated internationally for systematic humanitarian intervention. Jewish communities possessed survival strategies that depended on Jewish resources rather than government protection that anti-Semitic pressure could override. The Damascus blood crisis had proven that Jewish survival in the modern world would require permanent international Jewish political organization capable of rapid response to persecution threats anywhere Jewish communities existed. Moses had created the foundation for international Jewish advocacy, but the scope of Jewish vulnerability required institutional development that could maintain protective capabilities beyond any individual's lifetime. The critical question remained: could Jewish political influence be sustained when European anti-Semitic movements were actively interpreting Jewish political capabilities as evidence of a Jewish conspiracy that justified systematic elimination of Jewish political influence through the destruction of the Jewish communities that provided the foundation for their international organization? The victory in Damascus proved one terrifying truth. Moses Montefiore could rescue individuals from a mob, but he could not rescue a people if the very walls protecting them were torn down. He realized that the Jewish survival he fought for was inextricably bound to the sovereignty of the Islamic world. As the 1850s dawned, the threat shifted from blood libel to bank failure. To save his people, the stockbroker of London would now have to save an entire empire from the brink of extinction. Sultan Abdul-Majid's desperate summons arrived at Moses Montefiore's London residence on August 14, 1853. Just as Russian armies massed on Ottoman borders and European creditors prepared to partition the Ottoman territories among themselves, the The sick man of Europe was finally collapsing under financial pressures that threatened to destroy the Islamic empire that historically protected more Jewish lives than all Christian nations combined. The empire requires immediate financial salvation. The Sultan's personal envoy explained, his voice strained. European banks demand territorial concessions that would eliminate Jewish protection across 3 continents. The crisis represented everything Moses had feared during 2 decades of Ottoman Jewish cooperation. European powers had coordinated their pressure on Ottoman finances to create an impossible Hobson's choice. Ottoman authorities could accept European financial control, which would impose Christian legal frameworks requiring Jewish persecution, or they could maintain Islamic Jewish protection while facing European economic warfare that would bankrupt the empire and enable European territorial partition that would eliminate Jewish communities through forced population transfers. You see, the 1853 Ottoman financial crisis wasn't accidental economic difficulty. It was systematic European strategy designed to eliminate Ottoman independence through coordinated financial pressure. British, French, Austrian, and Russian banks had quietly coordinated to demand the simultaneous repayment of Ottoman debts that no government could possibly meet without liquidating essential state assets. European powers would then acquire vast Ottoman territories through debt collection procedures that would appear legally legitimate while achieving the territorial partition that military conquest hadn't accomplished. The numbers were devastating. Ottoman government debt exceeded 400 million sterling, approximately 64 billion in modern money, while annual Ottoman revenues totaled barely 75 million. European creditors were aggressively demanding immediate payment of bonds that weren't scheduled for maturity until 1870, creating an artificial financial emergency that would force Ottoman territorial concessions within months rather than the decades that normal amortization schedules would have provided. Moses understood immediately that Ottoman financial collapse would eliminate Jewish protection across territories where 2.8 million Jews lived under Islamic tolerance protection, that Christian European occupation would replace with systematic persecution. European partition of Ottoman territories would implement European legal frameworks that often defined Jews as having civil disabilities, requiring expulsion or conversion. Jewish communities that had flourished under Islamic protection for centuries would face elimination within years of European Christian administration. I mean, consider the scope of potential disaster. Jewish communities in Constantinople, Smyrna, Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem, and dozens of smaller cities would lose the legal protection that had enabled commercial and cultural prosperity for over 400 years. European occupation would impose Christian European anti-Semitic legislation that would eliminate Jewish economic participation, restrict Jewish religious practice, and enable European anti-Semitic movements to implement population policies that would force Jewish immigration from territories where Jewish communities had existed since ancient times. But Moses also recognized that the Ottoman financial crisis created unprecedented opportunities for Jewish-Islamic cooperation that could strengthen both Ottoman independence and Jewish security. European financial warfare against Ottoman sovereignty was creating Ottoman incentives for alternative financial relationships that wouldn't require Ottoman territorial concessions to European Christian powers. Jewish capital could provide Ottoman financial salvation, while Ottoman protection could guarantee Jewish survival against European Christian anti-Semitism. The challenge was providing Ottoman financial assistance at scales that exceeded Moses's individual capabilities while coordinating international Jewish resources for systematic Ottoman support that could compete with the sheer weight of European financial pressure. Moses needed to transform occasional Jewish-Ottoman cooperation into a permanent Jewish-Ottoman alliance that would serve both Jewish survival and Ottoman independence against European threats to both Islamic sovereignty and Jewish security. Moses's response demonstrated a strategic brilliance that transformed the crisis into an opportunity for unprecedented Jewish-Ottoman partnership. Instead of simply providing emergency financial assistance, Moses proposed a systematic restructuring of Ottoman finances that would eliminate European creditor control while establishing permanent Jewish financial relationships focused on Ottoman development that would serve both Jewish and Ottoman strategic interests. The proposal was revolutionary. Moses would coordinate international Jewish capital to refinance Ottoman debt through new bonds marketed exclusively to Jewish investors across Europe, Asia, and America. These bonds would provide the Ottoman government with immediate capital to repay European creditors, while establishing Jewish investors as Ottoman financial partners rather than distant creditors. Jewish financial expertise would reorganize Ottoman revenue collection and expenditure management to improve Ottoman fiscal efficiency, while simultaneously creating Jewish economic integration with Ottoman administration. Here's what made the proposal unprecedented. Moses was offering to transform Jewish financial capabilities into Ottoman state capacity through partnership rather than subordination. Jewish capital would strengthen Ottoman independence, while Ottoman protection would guarantee Jewish survival. European financial pressure against Ottoman sovereignty would create permanent incentives for Ottoman Jewish cooperation that would benefit both Islamic and Jewish interests against European Christian threats to both communities. Sultan Abdulmejid's acceptance of Moses's proposal created the first systematic Jewish-Islamic political alliance since ancient times. Ottoman authorities would provide Jewish communities with robust legal protection and commercial opportunities throughout Ottoman territories. Jewish financiers, in turn, would provide the Ottoman government with essential capital and expertise for development projects that would strengthen Ottoman capabilities for maintaining independence against European pressure. The implementation required unprecedented coordination between Jewish communities across 3 continents that had never previously cooperated for systematic political objectives. Moses organized vast Jewish financial contributions from London, Paris, Amsterdam, Vienna, New York, and smaller Jewish communities across Europe and America. Jewish merchants provided Ottoman authorities with crucial commercial intelligence about European markets that enabled Ottoman economic planning for reducing Ottoman dependence on European trade relationships. The financial results exceeded everyone's expectation. Jewish capital orchestrated a massive £400 million intervention. $280 million was deployed to restructure sovereign debt and buy back control from European creditors, while the remaining $120 million was funneled into vital development projects. This strategic move effectively terminated European financial leverage over the Sublime Porte, replacing foreign pressure with a permanent partnership that secured Jewish influence over Ottoman minority protection policies. But the success also created European political opposition that immediately recognized Jewish-Ottoman cooperation as a direct threat to European expansion in Ottoman territories. European governments began coordinating diplomatic pressure on Ottoman authorities to restrict Jewish political influence that was visibly strengthening Ottoman resistance to European territorial demands. European anti-Semitic movements interpreted Jewish financial success in Ottoman territories as evidence of a global Jewish conspiracy to use Islamic power against Christian civilization. The European response was systematic and sophisticated. French diplomats demanded Ottoman restrictions on Jewish commercial activities that were strengthening Ottoman economic independence from European commercial relationships. British officials pressured Ottoman authorities to limit Jewish participation in Ottoman administration that was providing the Ottoman government with expertise for resisting British territorial demands. Russian representatives threatened Ottoman-Russian commercial relationships if Ottoman authorities continued Jewish political integration that was strengthening Ottoman capabilities for maintaining territorial independence. Moses realized that the success of Jewish-Ottoman cooperation was creating European incentives for coordinated European-Ottoman conflict that could destroy both Jewish security and Ottoman independence. European powers would prefer Ottoman territorial partition over Ottoman independence that depended on Jewish support for maintaining Islamic resistance to Christian European expansion. The solution required expanding Jewish-Ottoman cooperation towards systematic international alliance that could resist European pressure through coordination with other powers that opposed European expansion. Moses began exploring opportunities for Jewish mediation between Ottoman authorities and burgeoning American commercial interests that could provide the Ottoman government with alternative relationships that reduced Ottoman dependence on European diplomatic approval. Moses strategically identified the United States as the essential third pillar for this alliance. Unlike the European great powers, the young American Republic possessed burgeoning commercial ambitions without the colonial hunger for Ottoman territorial partition. By positioning American economic interests as a counterweight to European aggression, Moses created a diplomatic tripwire. Any European attempt to dismantle the Ottoman Empire would now threaten not just Jewish security, but also the lucrative, independent trade routes of a rising Western power that refused to play by the Old World's rules. American commercial expansion was creating American interest in Ottoman territorial independence, which served American competitive advantages over European commercial monopolies in Eastern Mediterranean markets. Jewish financial networks could facilitate American-Ottoman commercial relationships, while American political support could strengthen the Ottoman international position against European pressure for territorial concessions. By 1855, 2 years after the crisis began, Moses had transformed the Ottoman financial emergency into permanent Jewish-Ottoman-American cooperation that protected Jewish communities while strengthening Ottoman independence through international relationships that reduced Ottoman vulnerability to European pressure. Jewish survival was no longer dependent on European tolerance, but was secured through Islamic protection that served Islamic strategic interests. The Ottoman crisis phase had demonstrated that Jewish financial capabilities could prevent Islamic political collapse, while Islamic protection could guarantee Jewish survival against European Christian anti-Semitism. Moses had created the first systematic Jewish-Islamic alliance that served both Jewish and Islamic interests against European threats to both communities. But the success was creating European determination to eliminate Jewish-Ottoman cooperation through systematic anti-Semitic pressure that would force Jewish communities to choose between Jewish survival and Islamic alliance. The next phase would test whether Jewish-Ottoman cooperation could survive European anti-Semitic warfare designed to eliminate Jewish political capabilities that were strengthening Islamic resistance to European Christian expansion. By 1859, Moses Montefiore had transcended his role as a mere British financier to become the world's first stateless diplomat. While his alliance with the Ottoman Sultan held firm in the south, a colder, longer shadow began to stretch from the north. The machinery of persecution had found a new architect within the walls of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. This was no sudden skirmish, but a decades-long chess match against the sweeping power of the Tsars. Montefiore's Russian strategy had truly ignited in the bitter winter of 1846 in a daring move. He breached the Winter Palace to confront Tsar Nicholas I, successfully petitioning the monarch to rescind a lethal decree of expulsion that threatened Jewish communities along the sensitive Russian-Polish border. This mission established a historic precedent. For the first time, a private Jewish citizen had forced the Russian state to halt its gears of exclusion, providing a vital template for the even darker crisis that would follow in 1859. On April 27, 1859, a coded telegram shattered the peace of Montefiore's estate. The intelligence was harrowing. Reports surfaced of a contingency plan within the Tsarist administration for a mass forced relocation of Jewish populations toward the empire's most desolate eastern frontiers. If executed, this policy threatened to displace hundreds of thousands, potentially destabilizing the very demographic heart of global Jewry. Montefiore recognized this as a terrifying shift toward administrative elimination, using isolation and the harsh Russian climate to achieve what direct violence could not. With European powers remaining silent, he understood that this was a race against time. His subsequent 4-hour private audience at the Winter Palace wasn't just a diplomatic visit. It was a desperate gamble to dismantle a catastrophic precedent before it could become a reality. Moses understood immediately that Russian deportation plans threatened global Jewish survival beyond the immediate Russian victims. Successful Russian implementation of administrative genocide would provide European anti-Semitic movements with proven techniques for eliminating Jewish populations without triggering the international opposition that direct violence would create. European governments would cite the Russian precedent to justify similar policies that would systematically eliminate Jewish communities across Christian Europe. Consider the political dynamics enabling Russian planning. European governments were interpreting Russian Jewish persecution as a purely Russian internal affair that didn't justify international intervention. European Christian populations viewed Russian Jewish deportation as a reasonable response to alleged Jewish disloyalty during the Crimean War. European diplomatic services were actively avoiding criticism of Russian Jewish policies because European commercial interests required Russian cooperation for trade relationships that Russian diplomatic hostility could disrupt. But Moses also recognized that the Russian Jewish crisis created opportunities for demonstrating Jewish international value that could transform persecution into protection. If Jewish capabilities could be deployed effectively for Russian strategic objectives, Alexander II desperately needed capital and expertise for Russian modernization programs that European anti-Semitic pressure was making difficult to obtain through normal diplomatic channels. Jewish resources could provide Russian development assistance, while Russian Jewish protection could demonstrate Russian independence from European anti-Semitic pressure. The challenge was approaching Russian authorities, who inherently viewed Jewish political activities as a foreign conspiracy threatening Russian sovereignty, while offering Jewish services that would strengthen Russian capabilities for achieving the strategic objectives that Russian nationalism demanded. Moses needed to demonstrate that Jewish protection served Russian interests rather than challenging Russian authority through foreign influence that Russian nationalist movements were systematically opposing. Moses's approach required unprecedented personal risk that could have destroyed his international humanitarian capabilities if Russian authorities interpreted his intervention as foreign interference requiring punishment that would eliminate his ability to advocate for Jewish communities anywhere. Moses requested a direct audience with Tsar Alexander II through Russian diplomatic channels, a step that could have resulted in Moses's detention as a foreign agent if Russian authorities viewed his humanitarian mission as cover for intelligence activities that threatened Russian security. The audience took place at the Winter Palace on June 15, 1859, in circumstances that demonstrated both Moses's extraordinary international status and the desperate Russian need for international cooperation that Russian isolation was creating. Alexander II received Moses in a private session that lasted 4 hours, unprecedented access for a foreign private citizen addressing Russian domestic policy. The Tsar's willingness to discuss Jewish deportation plans revealed Russian recognition that Jewish persecution was creating international complications that Russian strategic objectives required avoiding. Here's what made Moses's Russian intervention revolutionary. He was offering Russian authorities systematic Jewish cooperation for Russian modernization programs in exchange for Russian Jewish protection that would serve Russian strategic interests against European anti-Semitic pressure. Jewish capital would fund Russian development projects that European financial markets were avoiding because of Russian political instability. Jewish expertise would assist Russian administrative modernization, while Jewish commercial networks would provide Russian products with international market access that European commercial discrimination was restricting. The proposal addressed Alexander II's fundamental dilemma. Russian modernization required European cooperation that Russian political independence conflicted with, while Russian domestic stability required managing Jewish populations that European anti-Semitic pressure encouraged Russia to eliminate. Jewish partnership could provide Russian modernization assistance, while Russian Jewish protection could demonstrate Russian independence from European anti-Semitic expectations. Alexander II's response revealed a sophisticated understanding of the international political advantages that Jewish cooperation could provide for Russian strategic objectives. Russian protection of Jewish communities would demonstrate Russian religious tolerance that contrasted favorably with European Christian anti-Semitism. Jewish financial assistance would enable Russian development that reduced Russian dependence on European capital markets. Jewish commercial networks would provide Russian economic access to markets that European political hostility was restricting. The agreement reached during the audience established unprecedented Jewish-Russian cooperation that transformed potential genocide into systematic Jewish protection through Jewish integration with Russian strategic development. Russian authorities would cancel Jewish deportation plans while providing Jewish communities with expanded commercial opportunities that would enable Jewish economic contribution to Russian modernization programs. Jewish financiers would provide the Russian government with capital for infrastructure development, while Jewish merchants would facilitate Russian commercial expansion into international markets. This was the Montefiore paradox. He secured Jewish safety, not by changing the Tsar's heart, but by making Jewish survival a Russian national interest. The railroads that began to crisscross the Russian steppe were built on Jewish capital, and as long as the trains ran, the deportations stayed frozen. But implementation required overcoming fierce Russian bureaucratic opposition that viewed Jewish protection as foreign pressure threatening Russian administrative independence. Russian officials who had developed the deportation plans interpreted cancellation as evidence that foreign Jewish influence was controlling Russian policy decisions. Slavophile movements accused Alexander II of subordinating Russian interests to Jewish demands that served an international Jewish conspiracy against Russian Orthodox Christian civilization. Moses's response demonstrated brilliant understanding of Russian political psychology that neutralized opposition through nationalist, rather than humanitarian arguments for Jewish protection. Jewish cooperation was strengthening Russian capabilities for achieving Russian strategic objectives, rather than serving foreign interests that conflicted with Russian sovereignty. Russian Jewish protection was demonstrating Russian independence from European anti-Semitic pressure, rather than Russian subordination to foreign Jewish influence. The systematic implementation created unprecedented Jewish security in Russian territories, while providing Russian authorities with Jewish capabilities that accelerated Russian modernization beyond European expectations. Jewish capital funded Russian railroad construction that connected Russian territories more effectively than European transportation systems. Jewish commercial expertise enabled Russian agricultural exports that competed successfully with European agricultural production. Jewish financial services improved Russian revenue collection efficiency while reducing Russian dependence on European commercial relationships. European response revealed both the effectiveness and the dangers of Jewish-Russian cooperation success. European governments recognized that Russian Jewish protection was strengthening Russian capabilities for resisting European pressure, while Russian modernization was reducing European leverage over Russian policy decisions. European anti-Semitic movements interpreted Jewish success in Russian territories as confirmation of international Jewish conspiracy to control European governments through financial manipulation that threatened European Christian independence. The success attracted demands from Jewish communities across Europe who were facing increasing anti-Semitic pressure that threatened to reproduce Russian persecution scenarios in territories where Jewish populations lacked comparable international advocacy capabilities. Moses was receiving requests for intervention from Jewish communities in Romanian territories, Moroccan regions, and other areas where local anti-Semitic movements were developing persecution policies modeled on Russian deportation plans. By 1862, 3 years after the crisis began, Moses had transformed potential Russian genocide into systematic Russian Jewish cooperation that protected 600,000 Russian Jews while strengthening Russian strategic capabilities through Jewish financial and commercial contributions. Russian Jewish communities were experiencing unprecedented prosperity and security, while Russian authorities were achieving modernization objectives that European opposition had been preventing. The Russian rescue phase demonstrated that Jewish international advocacy could prevent genocide through strategic coordination between Jewish capabilities and host government interests that served both Jewish survival and host government strategic objectives. Moses had proven that Jewish protection could be achieved through Jewish usefulness rather than depending on host government humanitarian sentiments that anti-Semitic pressure could decisively override. Yet, this very success was inadvertently galvanizing a systematic European opposition focused on neutralizing Jewish political capabilities, which were increasingly perceived as forces strengthening non-Christian governments and impeding European Christian expansionist designs. The geopolitical landscape was hardening. The immediate future would critically test whether Jewish international influence possessed the resilience and strategic depth necessary to survive coordinated European pressure explicitly designed to eliminate Jewish political activities that were serving as a vital source of resilience for Islamic and Orthodox resistance to dominant European, Catholic, and Protestant political expansion. By the early 1860s, Montefiore's ledgers revealed a terrifying truth that no one else dared now to face. The great empires of the East were drowning in debt they could never repay. He saw the inevitable bankruptcy coming, and with it, the potential collapse of Jewish protection across the Muslim world. He knew that when these empires eventually fell to their knees, he would need more than gold to negotiate. He would need an absolute moral mandate. Thus, the crisis in Morocco in 1863 became his strategic testing ground. By securing a sultan's justice today, he was building the moral collateral he would need to weaponize his wealth and restructure the fate of empires just a few years later. On November 23, 1863, a frantic plea from Sultan Muhammad IV reached Moses Montefiore. European naval forces had established a punishing blockade of Moroccan ports, demanding massive indemnities that would immediately bankrupt the Moroccan treasury and decisively expose 300,000 Moroccan Jews to systematic persecution that Spanish and French occupation authorities were already planning to implement as administrative necessities for establishing secure European control over North African territories. The faithful require your intervention. The Sultan's heavily encrypted message revealed, European powers are demanding Jewish expulsion as an explicit condition for ending the blockade. The Moroccan crisis represented a calculated evolution of European imperial strategy, one that weaponized anti-Semitism as a core colonial administration technique. European occupation of North African territories faced persistent, fierce resistance from entrenched Islamic populations who viewed European Christian expansion as an existential threat to Islamic civilization. European colonial authorities quickly discovered that eliminating Jewish communities effectively removed the populations whose commercial expertise and financial resources provided the essential infrastructure enabling Islamic resistance to centralized European colonial administration. Moroccan Jews had long provided Islamic authorities with crucial commercial and financial capabilities that solidified Islamic independence from predatory European economic control. Jewish merchants maintained complex, extensive trade networks connecting Moroccan economic production directly with international markets. Bypassing European commercial monopolies, Jewish financial expertise enabled the Moroccan government to establish reliable revenue collection, reducing Moroccan dependence on European commercial taxation. In essence, Jewish communities provided Islamic authorities with viable, alternative administrative capabilities that the ongoing European colonial pressure was attempting to systematically eliminate. The European strategy was sophisticated and systematic. Spanish forces had violently bombarded Tétouan, while French naval squadrons maintained rigid control over Atlantic approaches to Moroccan ports. The European demands for war indemnities dramatically exceeded the total Moroccan government revenues for 3 years, creating a calculated financial impossibility that would inevitably force Moroccan territorial concessions, leading to European control. European occupation authorities would then implement administrative policies requiring the immediate expulsion of Jews, justified as security measures, against populations whose primary loyalty lay with Islamic rather than Christian authority. Representing a potential threat to future European colonial stability, Montefiore understood immediately that Moroccan Jewish persecution was an integral component of a systematic European strategy designed to eliminate Islamic independence through the precise elimination of Jewish capabilities that were enabling Islamic resistance to European colonial pressure. European success in Morocco would establish a devastating precedent for Jewish elimination throughout all Islamic territories, as European expansion inevitably continued across Africa and Asia. Jewish survival in Islamic territories required the prevention of European colonial success that was fundamentally dependent on Jewish elimination for achieving colonial stability. The strategic implications for global Jewish survival were staggering. Islamic territories had historically provided Jewish communities with crucial protection that Christian European expansion was now systematically dismantling. European colonial success, demanding Jewish elimination from Islamic territories, would shatter the foundation of Jewish security that centuries of Islamic tolerance had painstakingly created. Jewish communities would face global, simultaneous persecution as European Christian expansion eliminated both Islamic protection and vital Jewish capabilities for self-defense. However, Montefiore also recognized that the Moroccan crisis created immediate opportunities for demonstrating the power of Islamic-Jewish cooperation, a cooperation that could strengthen Islamic resistance to European colonial pressure while guaranteeing Jewish communities permanent protection through a formal Islamic strategic alliance against aggressive European Christian expansion. Islamic authorities desperately needed financial and commercial capabilities to maintain their sovereignty against overwhelming European pressure. Jewish resources could provide immediate, decisive Islamic strategic assistance. While Islamic protection could guarantee Jewish survival against European persecution, the challenge was coordinating immediate international intervention that could prevent Moroccan state collapse while meticulously avoiding European military escalation that could trigger a comprehensive European war against Islamic independence. Montefiore needed to provide Moroccan authorities with financial assistance to enable the payment of European indemnities, while simultaneously coordinating international diplomatic pressure that would prevent the subsequent European territorial occupation that Jewish assistance had enabled Morocco to avoid. Montefiore's approach required unprecedented personal risk, potentially resulting in his detention by European military forces if authorities interpreted his intervention as providing aid to an enemy Islamic resistance against legitimate European colonial expansion. Moses traveled directly to Morocco during the active European blockade. Utilizing secure Ottoman diplomatic channels that provided him with Islamic diplomatic protection, while simultaneously demonstrating powerful Islamic Jewish cooperation against hostile European Christian pressure. The journey itself served as a powerful testament to the international scope of Montefiore's humanitarian and political networks. Ottoman authorities provided Moses with diplomatic credentials, enabling safe passage through European-controlled territories. Jewish communities across the Mediterranean basin provided real-time intelligence about European military operations, allowing Moses to reach Moroccan authorities without encountering blockading European naval forces. Islamic authorities in multiple territories coordinated complex protective arrangements, demonstrating an Islamic commitment to Jewish safety during humanitarian missions that strategically served Islamic State interests. The audience with Sultan Muhammad IV took place in Fez on December 18, 1863, under circumstances that underscored both Morocco's abject desperation and the Islamic recognition of Jewish strategic value for Islamic resistance to European pressure. Sultan Muhammad IV received Moses in a private session that lasted 2 full days, an unprecedented duration and level of access for a foreign Jewish representative addressing core Islamic domestic and foreign policy. The Sultan's detailed discussions of European pressure revealed a profound Islamic understanding that Jewish assistance was absolutely essential for maintaining Islamic independence against European colonial expansion. What made Montefiore's Moroccan intervention revolutionary was his comprehensive offer. He proposed systematic Jewish financial and commercial assistance to Islamic authorities for maintaining Islamic independence, in exchange for providing Jewish communities with permanent Islamic protection through a formal, enduring Islamic-Jewish political alliance. This alliance would serve both Islamic and Jewish strategic interests against the overarching threat of European Christian expansion. The proposal directly addressed Sultan Muhammad IV's impossible dilemma. European indemnity demands exceeded Moroccan financial capabilities, and European occupation would eliminate the Islamic independence that Moroccan sovereignty required. Jewish financial assistance could enable the immediate Moroccan payment of European indemnities, while Jewish commercial expertise would strengthen Moroccan economic independence, significantly reducing Moroccan vulnerability to future European financial pressure. Sultan Muhammad IV's acceptance created the first formal Islamic Jewish political alliance of its kind since medieval Al-Andalus. Moroccan authorities agreed to provide Jewish communities with permanent legal protection and commercial opportunities throughout Moroccan territories. Jewish financiers, in turn, committed to providing the Moroccan government with the necessary capital for paying the European indemnities, while Jewish merchants would assist comprehensive Moroccan commercial development aimed at strengthening Moroccan economic independence from suffocating European commercial control. Implementation required coordinating vast international Jewish resources for systematic Moroccan assistance that could genuinely compete with European financial pressure, all while meticulously avoiding European military intervention that could escalate the Moroccan conflict toward a comprehensive European war against Islamic independence. Montefiore organized substantial Jewish financial contributions from both European and American Jewish communities, while simultaneously coordinating with Ottoman authorities for robust Islamic diplomatic support of Moroccan resistance to European territorial demands. The financial assistance was immediate and substantial. Jewish capital provided the Moroccan government with 8 million francs for paying the Spanish War indemnities, while setting aside a further 4 million francs for Moroccan internal development, strengthening Morocco's capabilities for maintaining independence. European indemnity demands were satisfied, and Moroccan territorial integrity was preserved through Jewish financial intervention that crucially prevented immediate European territorial occupation. However, the subsequent European response revealed systematic European opposition to Islamic Jewish cooperation, which was successfully preventing European colonial success in Islamic territories. European governments began coordinating diplomatic pressure on Jewish communities to severely restrict Jewish financial assistance to Islamic authorities, which was overtly strengthening Islamic resistance to European expansion. European colonial advocates interpreted the Islamic Jewish cooperation as a profound international conspiracy aimed at preventing the expansion of European civilization into territories that European strategic objectives required controlling. The European pressure intensified when Moroccan economic recovery, enabled by Jewish assistance, demonstrated that Islamic independence was entirely achievable through Islamic Jewish cooperation, a fact that eliminated European leverage over Islamic policy decisions. French authorities demanded international restrictions on Jewish activities in North African territories, claiming these were preventing French colonial expansion. Spanish officials pressured Jewish communities to cease Moroccan assistance that was enabling Moroccan resistance to Spanish territorial demands. Montefiore's response again demonstrated a brilliant understanding of European competitive interests that could be leveraged against organized European anti-Semitic coordination. British strategic interests, especially in preventing French colonial expansion in Morocco, directly conflicted with French pressure for Jewish elimination that would inevitably enable French-Moroccan control. British support for Islamic Jewish cooperation could prevent French colonial success while providing the British with substantial commercial advantages in Moroccan territories that French control would eliminate. The British approach succeeded because Islamic Jewish cooperation provided significant British strategic advantages over French colonial competition, and Jewish capabilities were actively strengthening Islamic independence, an objective supported by British strategy. British diplomatic pressure protected Jewish activities in Morocco, and British-Moroccan commercial relationships provided lucrative alternatives to French commercial control, an opportunity made possible by Moroccan independence and Jewish assistance. By 1866, 3 years after the crisis began, Moses Montefiore had transformed potential Moroccan Jewish elimination into systematic Moroccan Jewish cooperation. This protected 300 1,000 Moroccan Jews, while strengthening Moroccan independence through an Islamic-Jewish alliance that enabled Moroccan resistance to European colonial pressure, Moroccan Jewish communities were experiencing unprecedented prosperity, and Moroccan authorities were maintaining sovereignty that European colonial expansion had violently threatened. The Moroccan mission demonstrated that Islamic Jewish cooperation could effectively preempt European colonial success, while providing Jewish communities with Islamic protection that served both Islamic and Jewish strategic interests against the comprehensive threat of European Christian expansion. Montefiore had proven that Jewish survival in Islamic territories could be guaranteed through Jewish strategic assistance that strengthened Islamic capabilities for maintaining independence against European pressure. But this success generated profound European recognition that Islamic Jewish cooperation represented a systematic, existential threat to European expansion, a threat that European anti-Semitic pressure alone could not neutralize. The next phase would test whether the nascent Islamic-Jewish alliance possessed the strength to survive coordinated European colonial pressure designed to eliminate both Islamic independence and Jewish capabilities for assisting Islamic resistance to European Christian expansion. The victory in Morocco had secured for Montefiore something that gold could never buy: the absolute trust of the Sultan. Now, armed with this moral mandate, he was ready for the ultimate endgame. In 1867, as the Ottoman Empire teetered on the brink of bankruptcy, the financial ghost emerged to execute an unprecedented intervention. This was the moment he officially weaponized his wealth to dictate the destiny of an entire region. Prince Carol. The first's panicked, coded message, marked by urgent desperation, sliced through encrypted channels and reached Moses Montefiore on October 7, 1867. The message detailed the grave threat. Romanian nationalist movements were aggressively preparing comprehensive legislation intended to systematically strip the citizenship from over 400,000 Romanian Jews, mandating their expulsion within a rigid 2-year timeline. This act threatened to unleash the largest, most destabilizing refugee crisis in modern European history, while simultaneously providing rapidly expanding European anti-Semitic movements with a meticulously crafted, replicable blueprint for systematic Jewish elimination that could be flawlessly adopted across Christian Europe. European powers are privately endorsing this Romanian solution. The prince urgently warned, international intervention is required immediately before parliamentary ratification renders this expulsion scheme irreversible. The Romanian crisis signified a disturbing and calculated evolution in anti-Semitic strategy, a pivot away from localized, individual persecution toward comprehensive, systematic legal elimination. This new method was engineered to present a veneer of constitutional legitimacy while still achieving genocidal objectives. The proposed Romanian legislation would meticulously avoid direct, violent pogroms against Jewish communities. Instead, it would erase their fundamental legal existence as recognized Romanian citizens, thereby rendering their continued presence within Romanian territory fundamentally illegal. Their departure would be managed through administrative procedures designed to appear orderly and humanitarian, all while forcibly channeling these massive Jewish populations into territories where survival would be statistically impossible. Crucially, this Romanian anti-Semitic policy was strategically designed to circumvent the complex, practical problems that previous, archaic persecution methods had created for European governments. Medieval expulsions had merely forced Jewish populations into adjacent territories, often resulting in neighboring states refusing the refugees, creating intractable diplomatic complications between European powers. Furthermore, military violence and organized pogroms against Jewish communities frequently generated international criticism, damaging European diplomatic credibility. The brilliance of the legal elimination of citizenship was that it ensured Jewish departure while absolving the Romanian state of all responsibility for the Jewish refugees' destinations, welfare, or ultimate survival. The scope of the potential disaster extended terrifyingly far beyond the 400,000 Romanian Jews. Successful implementation of this model of legal genocide would arm European anti-Semitic movements everywhere with a tested, constitutional procedure for eliminating entire Jewish populations without triggering the necessity of large-scale international humanitarian intervention. Already, powerful German nationalist movements were closely studying the Romanian legislation as the definitive model for future Prussian Jewish policy. Austrian anti-Semitic parties were developing comparable proposals targeting Habsburg territories. Even Russian Slavophile organizations were recommending the Romanian methods as the final procedure for completing the elimination of Russian Jewry, a process that Tsar Alexander II's temporary cooperation with Moses Montefiore had previously forestalled. Montefiore immediately grasped that the Romanian legislation represented the coordinated culmination of a systematic European effort toward a final solution to the Jewish question, executed through sophisticated legal procedures that would appear democratically sanctioned while achieving definitively totalitarian ends. European governments maintained a calculated distance, publicly avoiding direct support for Romanian persecution, yet simultaneously ensuring that no international intervention would successfully derail the Romanian initiative. Their objective was establishing an unchallenged precedent for European Jewish elimination. The level of coordination required for the Romanians' confidence in European non-interference was staggering. Romanian authorities were risking profound international diplomatic isolation by enacting anti-Jewish legislation that flagrantly violated established Ottoman minority protection principles and directly challenged the delicate European balance of power arrangements in the Balkans. Romanian leadership would only proceed with such a strategically perilous policy if major European powers had provided ironclad private assurances that Romanian Jewish persecution would not trigger European intervention, potentially threatening Romanian territorial independence. But Montefiore also recognized that the very gravity of the Romanian crisis created unprecedented opportunities for dramatically demonstrating Jewish international strategic value. This demonstration, he theorized, could transform cynical European anti-Semitic coordination into essential European Jewish protection, channeled through Jewish strategic services that European powers critically needed for their own objectives. The ongoing European competition for influence in the volatile Balkan region was generating powerful incentives for alternative policies that could grant competitive advantages over rivals currently backing Romanian anti-Semitic initiatives. The immense challenge lay in precisely identifying the specific European power whose core strategic interests would benefit most from actively opposing Romanian Jewish persecution, and then providing that power with decisive Jewish capabilities to justify European protection of Jewish communities against the relentless surge of anti-Semitic pressure. Moses needed to prove, irrefutably, that Jewish protection served concrete, identifiable European strategic objectives, rather than merely appealing to precarious European humanitarian sentiments that anti-Semitic pressure was systematically dismantling. Montefiore's detailed analysis revealed that British strategic interests primarily focused on preventing dangerous Austro-Russian cooperation and alignment in Balkan territories stood in direct conflict with Austro-Russian support for Romanian Jewish persecution, which served only to deepen Romanian reliance on Austro-Russian diplomatic protection. British opposition to the persecution could effectively fracture Austro-Russian coordination in the Romanian territories, while British Jewish cooperation offered the potential for significant British leverage over Romanian policy decisions that Austro-Russian influence was currently attempting to control. The resultant British approach required an unprecedented, delicate coordination between sustained British diplomatic pressure and decisive Jewish financial capabilities. This coordinated effort would provide Romanian authorities with attractive, viable alternatives to the crippling Austro-Russian support that the persecution policy was originally designed to secure. Moses offered the British Foreign Secretary, Lord Stanley, systematic Jewish financial assistance for comprehensive Romanian modernization and infrastructure programs in exchange for immediate, forceful British diplomatic pressure on Romanian authorities to abandon the Jewish persecution, a policy clearly serving Austro-Russian rather than genuine Romanian. Strategic interests. This Romanian strategy was revolutionary in its stark pragmatism. Montefiore was demonstrating that intense European competition for regional influence could be skillfully leveraged for Jewish protection, provided that Jewish capabilities were strategically deployed to deliver specific, verifiable competitive advantages over European rivals. Jewish survival, in this model, depended on European strategic competition rather than elusive European humanitarian cooperation, which anti-Semitic pressure was systematically impeding. The British response significantly exceeded Montefiore's expectations. Lord Stanley instantly recognized that British-Jewish cooperation against Romanian persecution offered a dual advantage. It could preempt Austro-Russian control over Romanian policy, while simultaneously providing the British with much-needed influence in the crucial Balkan territories. British diplomatic pressure on Romanian authorities would now be fully supported by potent Jewish financial incentives that could effectively make Romanian Jewish protection far more strategically profitable than Romanian Jewish persecution. Implementation, however, demanded overcoming ferocious Romanian nationalist resistance, which immediately framed the British Jewish intervention as a sinister foreign conspiracy designed to prevent the Romanian solution to the Jewish question, a solution demanded, they claimed, by Romanian sovereignty itself. Nationalist movements publicly accused Prince Carol I of subordinating vital Romanian interests to foreign pressure serving Jewish, rather than national, strategic objectives. Leaders of the Romanian Orthodox Church vehemently condemned the British-Jewish cooperation, labeling it an unholy Protestant-Jewish alliance threatening Orthodox Christian civilization. Moses's counter-response demonstrated a sophisticated mastery of Romanian political psychology, brilliantly transforming the British-Jewish intervention into an expression of Romanian nationalism against heavy-handed Austro-Russian interference in Romanian domestic affairs. Protecting Romanian Jews, Montefiore argued, served Romanian independence from Austro-Russian pressure, not foreign Jewish influence over Romanian sovereignty. British Jewish financial assistance was explicitly enabling Romanian development that actively reduced Romanian reliance on restrictive Austro-Russian economic relationships. The financial incentives were substantial and immediately impactful. Jewish capital provided the Romanian government with 15 million lei, a colossal sum at the time, specifically for critical infrastructure development that Romanian domestic resources were entirely incapable of financing. Jewish commercial networks offered Romanian agricultural products immediate access to international markets that punishing Austro-Russian commercial restrictions were previously blocking. Jewish financial expertise assisted in comprehensive Romanian administrative modernization, improving government efficiency while strategically reducing Romanian dependence on expensive, politically intrusive Austrian administrative advice. Romanian authorities, facing hard political realities, recognized that Jewish cooperation offered crucial Romanian strategic advantages that continued persecution would immediately eliminate, while simultaneously serving only Austro-Russian interests, focused on maintaining Romanian weakness. Romanian Jewish elimination would force Romanian dependence on Austro-Russian support. Jewish protection, conversely, was actively enabling Romanian independence through a British-Jewish alliance that dramatically strengthened Romanian capabilities for resisting Austro-Russian pressure. The anti-Jewish legislation was ultimately defeated in the Romanian parliament through systematic coordination between focused British diplomatic pressure, carefully deployed Jewish financial incentives, and rising Romanian nationalist opposition to persistent Austro-Russian influence over Romanian domestic policy. Romanian Jewish communities successfully maintained their citizenship rights, while Romanian authorities secured British diplomatic support and Jewish financial assistance that measurably strengthened Romanian national independence against Austro-Russian control. In Romania, Montefiore discovered the ultimate weapon of the modern age, the law. He understood that a stroke of a pen could be as lethal as a bayonet. His victory was not just in stopping a decree, but in creating a new geopolitical currency. He proved that Jewish loyalty and financial capacity were the only forces capable of buying a small nation's independence from the crushing embrace of giant empires. European anti-Semitic movements interpreted the Romanian legislative defeat as irrefutable proof of a vast international Jewish conspiracy capable of overriding European government policies through coordinated Jewish financial and political pressure. German anti-Semitic organizations immediately began developing sophisticated resistance strategies aimed at neutralizing Jewish political influence to prevent similar Jewish interventions in German territories. Austrian anti-Semitic parties demanded aggressive government investigations into Jewish financial activities that they claimed were undermining Austrian diplomatic objectives in the Balkan territories. However, a growing number of European governments also recognized a critical truth. Jewish international capabilities provided competitive advantages in European strategic competition that anti-Semitic pressure was preventing them from effectively utilizing. The clear British success in the Romanian territories, achieved directly through Jewish cooperation, served as a powerful demonstration of Jewish strategic value, a value other European powers were forfeiting through anti-Semitic policies that eliminated all possibilities for Jewish cooperation. This success immediately generated demands for expanded Jewish intervention across other Balkan territories, where anti-Semitic movements were implementing comparable persecution policies, threatening Jewish communities while serving competing European strategic interests. Jewish communities in Serbian territories, Bulgarian regions, and Greek areas began urgently requesting Montefiore's protection against local anti-Semitic movements that were receiving covert support from European powers whose interests conflicted directly with Jewish survival. By 1869, barely 2 years after the crisis began, Moses Montefiore had successfully transformed a potential Romanian genocide into a systematic Romanian Jewish-British cooperation framework. This protected 400,000 Romanian Jews, while simultaneously providing Romanian authorities with British diplomatic support and Jewish financial assistance that critically strengthened Romanian independence against Austro-Russian pressure. Romanian Jewish communities were experiencing unprecedented prosperity, and Romanian authorities were achieving strategic objectives that the anti-Semitic policy would have categorically prevented. The Romanian campaign demonstrated that Jewish international advocacy possessed the capacity to prevent systematic legal genocide through strategic coordination between Jewish capabilities and conflicting European interests, thereby creating European incentives for Jewish protection against destructive anti-Semitic pressure. Moses had proven that Jewish survival could be achieved through European strategic competition when Jewish resources were deployed to serve specific European competitive advantages. This very success, however, triggered a dangerous backlash as European powers realized their plans for systematic Jewish elimination were being sabotaged by Montefiore's diplomatic maneuvers. The pressure intensified, but he was playing a much longer game. Years later, in 1872, when the 88-year-old statesman made his final return to St. Petersburg, he witnessed the ultimate fruits of his labor. A new generation of Jewish professionals had risen, becoming the engine of modernizations for the very empire that once sought to expel them. His strategic vision had become an unshakable legacy. Yet, Montefiore knew that survival in a foreign land was merely a stay of execution. Rescue was not enough. He needed restoration, to move from shadow diplomacy to permanent sanctuary. The financial ghost turned his gaze toward the sacred sands of the East. The man who ruled by credit would now lay the cornerstones of a future nation, proving that Jewish identity could be both a citizen of the world and a master of its own ancestral soil. This was the birth of the Jerusalem Project. The breakthrough came on March 15th, 1855. A sultan's firman and imperial decree of immense weight arrived at Montefiore's London estate. It was Sultan Abdul-Majid's unprecedented permission to rebuild the Herva synagogue, the first official Jewish construction in the Holy City in over 3 centuries. This was no longer just about charity. It was about engineering a permanent home where 3 religions met, in a land that could either ignite a global war or foster a profound new harmony. The Jerusalem Project represented Montefiore's ultimate recognition that Jewish survival demanded far more than temporary rescue operations and external diplomatic protection. It fundamentally required the creation of a Jewish territorial sanctuary where Jewish communities could exist autonomously, independent of the precarious tolerance of a host government that anti-Semitic pressure could always abruptly revoke. Jerusalem offered unique political possibilities because ongoing Ottoman Islamic control provided an essential layer of protection against direct European Christian anti-Semitic pressure, while deep Jewish historical claims provided a moral and religious legitimacy that purely colonial settlement could never achieve. In 1855, Jerusalem existed in a state of delicate, unstable balance between intense competing religious and political claims. This fragility paradoxically created strategic opportunities for Jewish development, provided it was meticulously coordinated with Islamic authorities who required Jewish capabilities, while scrupulously avoiding Christian opposition that could destabilize Ottoman control over territories that European Christian expansionist powers aggressively coveted. Ottoman authorities would support Jewish development only if it actively strengthened Ottoman administration, while showcasing Islamic tolerance, a virtue that contrasted favorably with observed European Christian persecution. The challenge presented was one of extraordinary, systemic complexity. Jerusalem contained deeply sacred Christian holy sites that powerful European nations claimed responsibility for protecting, vital Islamic sacred areas that Ottoman authorities were bound to preserve, and Jewish religious locations that centuries of neglect and abandonment had left vulnerable to gradual elimination through competing religious expansion. Any Jewish development that even appeared to threaten established Christian or Islamic religious interests could instantly trigger international conflicts that would eliminate all Jewish possibilities while destabilizing Ottoman control. Montefiore's approach demanded balancing Jewish development with Christian and Islamic interests through a systematic coordination that aimed to strengthen, rather than threaten, existing religious arrangements. Jewish construction would focus on restoring and complementing existing religious architecture, not competing with it. Jewish economic development would strategically serve, not challenge, Ottoman administrative requirements. Crucially, Jewish population growth would support, rather than undermine, Ottoman territorial control against unrelenting European pressure for territorial concessions. The diplomatic complexity was immense. Montefiore required explicit Ottoman authorization for Jewish development that would not immediately trigger European Christian intervention claiming protection of Christian holy sites. He needed European acceptance of Jewish construction that would not create internal European pressure on Ottoman authorities to restrict Jewish activities. Most critically, he needed sustained Islamic religious approval for Jewish development that would demonstrably showcase Islamic tolerance while serving tangible Islamic strategic interests against encroaching European Christian expansion. The reconstruction of the Herva synagogue became the definitive test case for systematic Jewish development in Jerusalem through Islamic-Jewish cooperation that would serve Ottoman strategic objectives while establishing a Jewish sanctuary. Moses provided Ottoman authorities with detailed architectural plans that meticulously demonstrated Islamic architectural influences while strictly maintaining essential Jewish religious requirements. Jewish construction would exclusively employ Ottoman craftsmen and utilize Ottoman materials, powerfully demonstrating Jewish integration with Ottoman economic systems. But Montefiore also understood that synagogue reconstruction alone would not create a sustainable Jewish sanctuary. Jerusalem desperately needed robust Jewish economic development that could support a permanent Jewish population while providing Ottoman authorities with concrete economic benefits that would justify continued Jewish protection against European Christian pressure. Jewish agricultural development could provide Jerusalem with essential food security, while Jewish commercial activities could connect Jerusalem with international trade networks, strengthening Ottoman economic independence. The agricultural initiative was unprecedented in its scope and sophistication. Moses purchased 240 acres of land just outside Jerusalem's old city walls for agricultural development. This was intended to demonstrate conclusive Jewish capability for productive land use while providing Jerusalem with reliable food supplies. Reducing the city's dependence on unreliable regional agriculture, Jewish agricultural techniques would dramatically improve land productivity, and Jewish agricultural education would train Ottoman populations in modern farming methods, strengthening overall Ottoman agricultural capabilities. This agricultural project was revolutionary because Montefiore was creating the first systematic Jewish agricultural settlement since ancient times, achieved through direct cooperation with Islamic authorities who stood to benefit significantly from Jewish agricultural success. This endeavor provided Jewish communities with a permanent territorial foundation that did not require continuous host government tolerance for Jewish survival. While history often labels him a Zionist before the word was invented, Montefiore's vision was a complex masterclass in dual identity. Unlike the secular political Zionism that would follow decades later, his was a religious restorationism. He famously stated that Palestine must belong to the Jews and that Jerusalem was destined to be the seat of a Jewish state. Yet, here lies the true Montefiore paradox. He did not believe a Jewish state was a refuge from a hostile world, but its ultimate religious destiny. Even as he laid the literal cornerstones of a future Israel, he remained a fiercely loyal British patriot, proving to the world that an observant Jew could lead a nation-state without ever abandoning his home in the diaspora. He wasn't just building a city of stone. He was engineering a future where Jews could be both emancipated citizens of the world and masters of their own ancestral soil. The results swiftly exceeded all expectations. Jewish agricultural development increased land productivity by a staggering 340%, providing Jerusalem markets with reliable vegetable supplies that dramatically improved urban food security. Jewish agricultural techniques were rapidly adopted by Ottoman farmers throughout the region, and Jewish agricultural education provided Ottoman authorities with a cadre of trained agricultural specialists who improved Ottoman agricultural administration. Jewish agricultural success proved irrefutably that Jewish settlements strengthened, rather than threatened, Ottoman territorial development. However, this undeniable agricultural success immediately created European concerns that Jewish territorial development was establishing a political foundation that could challenge European Christian claims to Holy Land territories that European religious movements considered Christian heritage, requiring Christian control. European Christian organizations began intensely pressuring Ottoman authorities to restrict Jewish territorial acquisition that was visibly creating a permanent Jewish presence in lands that European Christian expansion considered its religious heritage. Montefiore's response again demonstrated a brilliant grasp of Christian European competitive interests that could be leveraged for Jewish protection. British Protestant interests in preventing French Catholic expansion in Holy Land territories conflicted sharply with Catholic pressure for Jewish restrictions that would enable Catholic territorial control. British support for Jewish development could prevent Catholic Holy Land expansion, while providing the British with decisive religious influence in territories that Catholic expansion would eliminate. The British Protestant Alliance's strategic backing of the Jerusalem project was fundamentally transactional, succeeding primarily because sustained Jewish development acted as a robust counterweight to Catholic territorial ambitions, simultaneously securing for the British Crown strategic access to Holy Land sites that the traditionally restrictive Catholic powers would have swiftly closed off. Moreover, British diplomatic shielding of Jewish activities provided a powerful, visible commitment to religious liberty, a stark and politically advantageous contrast to the institutionalized religious persecution long practiced by Catholic nations. While the Anglo-Jewish cooperation delivered immediate tactical and strategic advantages in areas threatened by Catholic expansionism, the educational pillar of the Jerusalem project established a far more enduring legacy. It forged a permanent foundation for Jewish intellectual and technical renewal that would ensure Jewish continuity and viability far beyond immediate geopolitical concerns or territorial security. Moses Montefiore had engineered the establishment of the first truly modern Jewish educational institution in Jerusalem, featuring a curriculum that daringly fused traditional Talmudic scholarship with rigorous modern technical and scientific education. This unique synthesis was designed to equip Jewish communities worldwide with the necessary capabilities for effective economic and political engagement in the rapidly modernizing world. This institution was revolutionary because it offered Jewish communities systematic preparation for modern economic and political participation without requiring the dissolution of their religious and cultural identity, a sacrifice demanded by previous assimilationist strategies. This new Jewish education system was designed to cultivate a generation of Jewish leaders capable of fierce and effective advocacy for Jewish interests, all while maintaining an unshakable commitment to Jewish survival and enduring Jewish values. The ensuing European reaction vividly illustrated both the monumental promise and the inherent dangers of this unexpected Jewish intellectual renaissance. European liberals lauded Jewish educational advancement as incontrovertible proof of modernization, signaling potential seamless integration into European civilization. Conversely, European conservatives vehemently opposed this burgeoning intellectual development, viewing it as a direct threat to European cultural supremacy and a source of competitive advantage for Jewish populations who, ironically, were now receiving superior educational preparation than many of their European peers. This opposition escalated sharply when the demonstrable success of the Jewish educational system confirmed that Jewish intellectual capabilities were not merely equal to, but in many sectors exceeding European expectations, while the Jewish commitment to their distinct identity proved far more tenacious than European assimilationist strategies had ever predicted. Radical anti-Semitic movements across Europe began ominously interpreting Jewish educational achievement not as natural progress, but as evidence of a malicious Jewish intellectual conspiracy, a plot designed to control European civilization through calculated, superior Jewish educational preparation and strategic positioning. Yet, this undeniable educational success also galvanized Jewish support from far-flung communities worldwide. They quickly recognized the Jerusalem institution as the central engine for Jewish intellectual renewal, essential for strengthening collective Jewish capacities to address the escalating threats of persecution emerging across Europe and within Islamic territories. Jewish communities responded by pouring financial resources into the educational expansion, simultaneously sending their most promising young minds to Jerusalem for advanced education, specifically designed to prepare them for sophisticated global Jewish community leadership. By 1860, merely 5 years after the project's inception, Moses had successfully laid the groundwork for a permanent, self-sustaining Jewish sanctuary in Jerusalem. This was achieved through the systematic and sophisticated coordination between strategic Jewish development objectives and core Ottoman geopolitical interests. This alliance provided Jewish communities with essential territorial security while simultaneously reinforcing weak Ottoman administration through crucial Jewish economic and intellectual contributions. Jewish agricultural expansion stabilized food supplies and reduced dependence on external markets, while the Jewish educational institution systematically trained specialized administrative experts who filled critical roles in Ottoman territorial development and governance. The Jerusalem project had demonstrated conclusively that Jewish territorial security was achievable not through passive pleading, but through systematic coordination between Jewish capabilities and host government strategic needs, a synergy that served both Jewish survival and vital host government development objectives. Moses had empirically proven that Jewish permanence could be secured on a territorial foundation that strengthened, rather than threatened, host government control, thereby providing Jewish communities with an enduring security that was no longer contingent on the fleeting tolerance of individual regimes. However, this very success was rapidly creating a European consensus that Jewish territorial development represented a systematic impediment to European imperial expansion in the Middle Eastern territories, while the accompanying Jewish intellectual development was forging capacities that posed a direct challenge to European intellectual and cultural hegemony. The coming phase would be a decisive test. Could this Jewish territorial sanctuary possibly withstand the overwhelming pressure of a unified European design engineered to eliminate the very foundation that was bolstering Islamic resistance to European Christian expansion, while simultaneously nullifying the Jewish intellectual capabilities that menaced European cultural control. If Jerusalem was the anchor for the Jewish soul, the world was still a storm for the Jewish body. Montefiore had built a sanctuary of stone, but he soon realized that stone could be bypassed by a faster, deadlier enemy, the synchronized hatred of a modern, connected world. By 1862, he understood that to protect his people, he could no longer be just a builder. He had to become the master of the wire, the architect of a global shadow network. The cipher machine clicking relentlessly in Moses Montefiore's private study at 2:47 a.m. on September 8, 1862, did not deliver a single message, but a torrent of simultaneous distress signals originating from Jewish communities scattered across 3 continents. Anti-Semitic persecution was erupting globally with a chilling, synchronized efficiency that strongly suggested systematic planning, aiming to overwhelm and eliminate vulnerable Jewish populations before international Jewish advocacy could mobilize any effective, concentrated resistance. The desperate messages flashed across the wire. Damascus preparing new blood libel. Warsaw implementing lethal restrictions. Tunis facing forced conversion demands. Require immediate intervention, all locations simultaneously. The global coordination of anti-Semitic persecution represented a terrifying evolution beyond localized, opportunistic initiatives. It was a calculated, international campaign deliberately structured to neutralize Jewish international advocacy capabilities by generating an operational overload, a multi-front, simultaneous crisis designed to prevent a concentrated response to any single threat. Anti-Semitic movements operating across Europe, Asia, and Africa were implementing persecution policies within the same narrow time frame, revealing a level of communication and planning that effortlessly transcended national boundaries, religious differences, and geographical constraints. Operational commanders of anti-Semitic organizations had clearly studied Moses's successful humanitarian intervention methods and developed sophisticated countermeasures specifically designed to achieve neutralization through organizational exhaustion. Multiple simultaneous crises would prevent any comprehensive, focused response to a specific persecution, serving as a brutal demonstration that even vast Jewish international capabilities could not guarantee protection when anti-Semitic pressure was strategically coordinated across diverse territories. The scope and precision of this coordination were unprecedented and utterly terrifying. European anti-Semitic movements were sharing operational playbooks and intelligence through covert networks that seamlessly connected radical German nationalist organizations with violent Russian Orthodox extremists and influential French Catholic anti-Semitic groups. Simultaneously, Islamic territories were being subjected to immense anti-Semitic pressure delivered via European diplomatic channels, which often demanded that Islamic authorities implement crippling anti-Jewish policies as an explicit condition for European diplomatic and commercial cooperation. Colonial administrations were receiving detailed European administrative instructions to systematically eliminate Jewish commercial activities that directly competed with established European commercial monopolies. Moses instantly grasped the gravity of the situation. Systematic international anti-Semitic coordination required a level of Jewish international response capability that vastly exceeded his individual organizational capacity. Isolated humanitarian interventions, however brilliant, could not possibly address multiple simultaneous crises. The systematic nature of the coordinated anti-Semitism demanded a matching level of systematic Jewish coordination, a sophisticated network capable of simultaneous, effective response across multiple territories, matching the operational sophistication of their adversaries. Imagine the staggering operational challenges inherent in responding to such coordinated global persecution. The Damascus blood libel accusations demanded immediate, high-stakes diplomatic intervention with Ottoman authorities, while the calculated Warsaw legal restrictions required intricate coordination with Russian government officials, who were simultaneously implementing comparable, Subtle policies of strangulation. Tunisian forced conversion threats necessitated emergency evacuation operations, even as anti-Semitic movements in numerous other territories were preparing comparable, simultaneous persecutions, requiring similar resource-intensive emergency responses. The only viable solution was the total transformation of Moses Montefiore's individual humanitarian advocacy into a systematic international Jewish organization, armed with the institutional capacity for coordinated defense against multiple simultaneous persecution threats. Moses immediately began organizing the first comprehensive Jewish international advocacy network, establishing operational capabilities spanning 3 continents and communication systems engineered to coordinate simultaneous humanitarian responses faster than anti-Semitic movements could execute their coordinated persecutions. The organizational challenge was monumental, unparalleled in Jewish history. Previous Jewish communities had generally remained isolated, unable to effectively pool resources or share timely intelligence regarding emerging persecution threats. Moses needed to engineer systematic Jewish international cooperation between communities that had historically never worked together, all while establishing strict operational security measures that would prevent anti-Semitic movements from infiltrating the nascent Jewish communication networks or disrupting coordination through the targeted persecution of Jewish organizational leadership. Moses's approach was not merely ambitious, it was revolutionary. Rather than creating a single, centralized Jewish organization, which could easily be eliminated by anti-Semitic pressure targeting the central leadership, Moses built a decentralized network architecture. This structure permitted multiple independent Jewish organizations to coordinate responses seamlessly, while maintaining full individual operational capabilities should other network components become compromised. Each Jewish community was empowered to develop robust, local advocacy capabilities, while simultaneously participating in the international coordination system, which exponentially multiplied local effectiveness. Herein lay the strategic brilliance of the network approach. Jewish communities retained the functional independence that protected them against systematic, centralized elimination, while developing the necessary coordination that provided indispensable mutual support during persecution emergencies. Local Jewish leadership possessed the nuanced understanding of regional political conditions, while the international Jewish coordination provided the critical financial resources, logistical support, and expertise that local communities could never access independently. The communication system supporting this network was sophisticated, surpassing anything previously attempted in international humanitarian work. Moses established encrypted telegraph networks connecting major Jewish centers across Europe, implemented coded correspondence systems for communities and territories lacking reliable telegraph access, and formulated emergency response protocols designed to coordinate simultaneous humanitarian interventions across diverse geographical regions, all while meticulously maintaining operational security against anti-Semitic surveillance. The intelligence capabilities of the nascent network quickly exceeded those of many established government systems. Jewish merchants, traversing vast commercial arteries, provided essential commercial intelligence about imminent persecution preparations, while Jewish professionals, lawyers, doctors, and journalists provided political intelligence concerning the subtle development of government policies that could adversely affect Jewish communities. Jewish financial networks supplied critical economic intelligence regarding the organizational funding of anti-Semitic movements, while Jewish educational institutions offered sophisticated intellectual analysis of anti-Semitic ideological development, enabling the prediction of persecution escalation patterns. However, this powerful network also created unprecedented Jewish political visibility and capabilities, which swiftly attracted furious opposition from governments who viewed the organized Jewish international organization as a dangerous foreign conspiracy threatening state sovereignty through private international coordination that operated entirely beyond government control. European authorities initiated investigations into Jewish communication networks, framing them as potential espionage operations. Meanwhile, Ottoman officials, while generally supportive, questioned whether this powerful Jewish international organization primarily served Ottoman interests or functioned as a vector for foreign influence that could compromise Ottoman independence. The first profound test arrived during the brutal winter of 1862 to 1863, when coordinated anti-Semitic persecution erupted simultaneously in 7 distinct territories spanning 3 continents. Damascus blood libel accusations coincided precisely with Warsaw commercial restrictions, Tunisian forced conversion demands, Romanian citizenship elimination proposals, Moroccan expulsion threats, Russian deportation preparations, and Austrian administrative persecution. A comprehensive and geographically dispersed crisis that would have utterly overwhelmed any conventional, individual humanitarian response. The network's response demonstrated operational capabilities that astounded professional military observers. Simultaneous diplomatic interventions were meticulously coordinated across multiple sovereign territories, while swift emergency evacuation operations successfully threatened Jewish populations to safety before persecution could escalate into violence. Financial pressure was strategically applied to governments actively supporting persecution, while alternative, mutually beneficial economic relationships were promptly offered to governments willing to provide reliable Jewish protection. The entire intricate, coordinated response was successfully completed within a tight 6-week window, all while maintaining strict operational security that prevented anti-Semitic movements from effectively disrupting Jewish operations. European governments were forced to realize that the Jewish International Organization possessed operational capabilities that rivaled, and in some cases exceeded, most state-level international coordination efforts, and that Jewish intelligence networks provided information that official government diplomatic services simply could not access through traditional channels. Consequently, some European officials began viewing Jewish international capabilities as a potential strategic asset that could be leveraged to serve European objectives, while other European authorities firmly interpreted the Jewish organization as an intolerable threat to European sovereignty that required swift elimination. The network's success soon attracted requests for Jewish international assistance from non-Jewish minority populations facing severe persecution that their own isolated communities could not address through individual advocacy. Armenian communities requested Jewish assistance for Ottoman intervention against targeted Armenian persecution. Greek minorities sought Jewish support for protection against intensifying Turkish administrative pressure. Various other Christian minorities implored the Jewish networks to coordinate international pressure against Islamic persecution of Christian populations. Moses's response revealed a sophisticated and far-reaching understanding of minority protection that extended beyond narrowly defined Jewish advocacy toward comprehensive humanitarian intervention. This strategy served multiple minority populations simultaneously while strengthening Jewish security through durable alliances with other minority groups facing comparable existential threats. Jewish international networks could efficiently provide humanitarian services to multiple minority populations, simultaneously cultivating a robust political coalition that could resist majority persecution far more effectively than any individual minority advocacy group could hope to achieve alone. However, this expansion toward comprehensive minority protection also generated fierce political opposition from majority populations who viewed Jewish humanitarian advocacy as a foreign conspiracy, a plot designed to protect minorities whose loyalty to the majority government authority was deemed questionable. Majority nationalist movements interpreted Jewish protection of non-Jewish minorities as conclusive evidence that the Jewish International Organization served external rather than domestic interests, and that the Jewish minority protection networks were actively undermining majority population unity by encouraging minority resistance to majority political control. This presented a fundamental dilemma for Jewish survival strategy. Jewish security required robust minority rights protection that inherently served Jewish interests, but vocal minority rights advocacy invariably attracted virulent majority opposition, which could severely threaten Jewish communities through coordinated majority persecution of minority populations who dared to challenge majority authority through the organized resistance that Jewish international networks were enabling. By 1865, 3 years after the formation of the core network, Moses had established what was arguably the most sophisticated international humanitarian organization in history, boasting operational capabilities that spanned 3 continents and responsive systems that could coordinate simultaneous interventions across numerous territories, all while maintaining communication security that protected Jewish communities from targeted persecution, aimed at compromising organizational effectiveness. The global network phase conclusively demonstrated that Jewish survival in the modern world demanded a systematic, international Jewish organization capable of continuous humanitarian intervention that could effectively address multiple, simultaneous persecution threats while maintaining operational integrity that individual Jewish advocacy could never achieve. Moses had forged the permanent institutional foundation for Jewish international advocacy, an entity capable of protecting Jewish communities worldwide while serving broader humanitarian objectives that strategically strengthened Jewish security through alliance with other populations facing comparable persecution. Yet, this success was simultaneously generating organized opposition from governments and majority populations who viewed the Jewish international organization as a systematic and unacceptable threat to state sovereignty and majority population control, a threat that required concerted, coordinated pressure designed to eliminate Jewish organizational capabilities. The next phase would be the ultimate test. Could the Jewish international networks survive aggressive government pressure designed to eliminate Jewish organizational effectiveness while still maintaining the essential humanitarian capabilities required for Jewish survival? To view him only as a flawless icon is to miss the complicated humanity that made his struggle so visceral. Historical accounts and family records reveal a more somber, warts-and-all figure who could be pompous, authoritarian, and dismissive of subordinates. Most strikingly, family history suggests he may have fathered an illegitimate child with a 16-year-old domestic servant. Late in life, a reminder that the protector of a nation was a man of deep and troubling human contradictions. A century of life, a lifetime of battles. But his final crusade was not for his people. It was for the future of humanity itself. In the autumn of 1874, Moses Montefiore was a man out of time. At 90 years old, he had outlived his rivals, his allies, and even his own era. But the network he built was screaming once more. He realized his final battle wouldn't be won with a journey or a loan, but with an inheritance. He had to ensure that when his heart stopped beating, the shield he had held over his people would stay raised forever. The urgent summons that violently shattered Moses Montefiore's 90th birthday celebration on October 24th, 1874, arrived through emergency cipher channels that had been utterly silent since the harrowing Damascus crisis. The message was devastating. Systematic persecution, coordinating across Eastern Europe. Romania, implementing citizenship elimination. Serbia, planning mass expulsion. Bulgaria, preparing forced conversion mandates. Russian authorities withdrawing historic protection agreements. Coordinated European action suggests a final solution is approaching. Your immediate intervention required for survival of 3.2 million Eastern European Jews. At the age of 90, frail but strategically astute, Moses faced the greatest and most existential humanitarian crisis of his unparalleled career. Eastern European governments were coordinating the systematic elimination of vast Jewish populations through the calculated manipulation of legal procedures, measures that would appear superficially constitutional while achieving profound genocidal objectives. European anti-Semitic movements had spent 30 years meticulously developing sophisticated strategies aimed specifically at neutralizing the international Jewish advocacy capabilities that Moses had so painstakingly created. The 1874 Eastern European crisis represented the chilling culmination of this strategic development. Simultaneous persecution across multiple territories would successfully prevent a concentrated international response, while coordinated legal elimination would circumvent the violent, visible persecution that had previously enabled Moses to successfully organize international humanitarian interventions. European governments sought to achieve Jewish elimination through bureaucratic, administrative procedures that would appear democratically legitimate, all while serving radical nationalist objectives that large portions of the European populace strongly supported. The level of administrative coordination was unprecedented in anti-Semitic history. Romanian constitutional conventions were drafting complex citizenship legislation explicitly designed to eradicate Jewish legal existence. Serbian parliamentary proceedings were developing meticulously worded expulsion laws that would mandate Jewish departure within a rigid 6-month deadline. Bulgarian administrative regulations were implementing conversion requirements that aimed to eliminate Jewish religious identity entirely. Simultaneously, Russian bureaucratic procedures were systematically withdrawing the protection agreements that had narrowly prevented massive Jewish persecution since Moses' intervention in 1859. Moses instantly understood that the coordinated Eastern European persecution represented a unified European strategy aimed at eliminating the 3.2 million Eastern European Jews, who constituted over 60% of the world's entire Jewish population. The successful elimination of these Eastern European Jewish communities would destroy the very demographic and cultural foundation that had enabled Jewish survival through centuries of previous persecution periods, while simultaneously crippling Jewish international advocacy beyond repair, rendering it incapable of protecting the remaining Jewish communities worldwide. One must consider the catastrophic scope of the potential disaster. Eastern European Jewish communities contained the world's largest concentrations of Jewish scholarship, specialized commercial expertise, and unique cultural development, all of which had flourished under centuries of complex Islamic and Orthodox protection. Their elimination would erase vital intellectual and economic resources upon which Jewish communities globally depended for religious leadership, the maintenance of international commercial networks, and the cultural continuity essential for preserving Jewish identity across the dispersed populations. Yet, Moses also recognized that the Eastern European crisis, paradoxically, presented his final, crucial opportunity to demonstrate Jewish international capabilities powerful enough to prevent systematic Jewish elimination, while simultaneously establishing a permanent, durable system of Jewish protection secured through international relationships that would inherently survive individual government policy changes. European competition for regional influence was creating powerful incentives for alternative policies, policies that could secure competitive advantages through Jewish cooperation directed against European rivals who supported Jewish persecution. The monumental challenge was coordinating an international intervention on an unprecedented scale while managing the personal limitations that extreme age was undeniably imposing on his humanitarian capabilities. Moses needed to mobilize the entire Jewish international network for a comprehensive, multifaceted response, while coordinating simultaneously with European governments whose strategic interests could potentially be aligned with Jewish protection against unified European anti-Semitic coordination. Most critically, he needed to establish a permanent institutional foundation for Jewish international advocacy, a structure capable of continuing to protect Jewish communities long after his individual humanitarian career concluded. Moses' final crusade necessitated the fundamental transformation of individual humanitarian advocacy into a permanent international Jewish organization, armed with institutional capabilities that could survive beyond any single leadership, while maintaining the operational effectiveness necessary to address the systematic persecution strategies that coordinated anti-Semitic movements were developing to eliminate all possibilities of Jewish survival. Jewish international advocacy required an unshakable institutional foundation that could guarantee permanent, systematic Jewish international protection. His approach was revolutionary in both scope and ambition. Instead of merely addressing individual persecution crises through temporary, ad hoc humanitarian interventions, Moses initiated the organization of the first permanent international Jewish advocacy institution. This institution possessed systematic capabilities for proactively preventing persecution through ongoing political coordination, developing emergency response networks for physically protecting threatened Jewish communities, and cultivating high-level diplomatic relationships that would provide Jewish communities with permanent international recognition and protection, rather than temporary humanitarian assistance. The defining feature of this final crusade was its unprecedented scope. Moses was actively creating an institutional foundation for permanent Jewish political existence, establishing the Jewish people as a recognized international minority group with codified rights and systematic protection that did not rely on individual government tolerance or subjective humanitarian sentiment. Jewish survival would be guaranteed through established internal Jewish institutional capabilities rather than precariously depending on host government protection that anti-Semitic pressure could invariably dismantle. This institutional development necessitated coordinating global Jewish financial resources, leveraging elite political expertise, and consolidating international relationships that had never previously been systematically organized for sustained political objectives. Jewish communities spanning 3 continents pledged the necessary long-term funding for permanent advocacy operations, while Jewish professionals were recruited to staff international offices capable of coordinating systematic political intervention. Crucially, Jewish international relationships provided essential diplomatic access that could influence fundamental government policy decisions affecting Jewish communities worldwide. Yet, this institutional development also required Moses to overcome fierce resistance within Jewish communities themselves. Many established Jewish leaders viewed systematic political organization as a dangerous, high-risk provocation that would inevitably attract renewed anti-Semitic hostility toward Jewish communities, who had traditionally survived through a calculated policy of political invisibility. Some Jewish communities genuinely opposed systematic Jewish political advocacy, viewing it as a threat to Jewish security that depended on strictly avoiding any political activities that could possibly be misinterpreted as a Jewish conspiracy against host government authority. Moses' response demonstrated a highly sophisticated understanding of Jewish survival psychology, successfully balancing immediate Jewish security requirements with the political necessities of modern circumstances. He argued persuasively that systematic Jewish political organization would enhance, rather than threaten, Jewish security by providing Jewish communities with the necessary, systematic protection against anti-Semitic persecution that political invisibility could no longer prevent. Modern anti-Semitic movements were ruthlessly targeting Jewish communities regardless of Jewish political activity, whereas strategic Jewish political organization offered a tangible layer of protection that passive political invisibility could simply not achieve. The Ottoman alliance remained absolutely crucial for the institutional success. Ottoman authorities offered the Jewish International Organization both diplomatic protection and a secure operational headquarters that coordinated European anti-Semitic pressure could not eliminate through individual government persecution of advocacy activities. Ottoman support for Jewish international advocacy demonstrated a visible Islamic commitment to minority protection that strengthened the Ottoman international position, while simultaneously providing Jewish communities with an institutional sanctuary that aggressive European Christian expansionism could not threaten. Ottoman protection of the Jewish International Organization served core Ottoman strategic interests, as Jewish advocacy capabilities subtly yet powerfully served Ottoman resistance to the European expansion that continually threatened Ottoman independence. The eventual crisis resolution required unprecedented coordination between powerful Jewish institutional capabilities, unwavering Ottoman strategic support, and strategic alignment with key European competitive interests that could be leveraged against coordinated European anti-Semitic policies. British strategic interests in preventing Russian expansion into Eastern European territories directly conflicted with Russian support for Eastern European Jewish persecution, which served only to strengthen Russian influence over the territories where Jewish elimination was occurring. British opposition to Eastern European Jewish persecution could effectively impede Russian territorial expansion, while securing British competitive advantages in territories where Russian persecution was eliminating populations whose commercial capabilities served British rather than Russian strategic interests. The institutional intervention ultimately succeeded through the systematic coordination between focused Jewish advocacy, critical Ottoman diplomatic support, and decisive British strategic pressure. This formidable alliance prevented the systematic Eastern European Jewish persecution while establishing a permanent institutional foundation for Jewish international advocacy. Romanian citizenship legislation was modified to maintain fundamental Jewish legal existence, while Serbian expulsion laws were delayed indefinitely through concerted European diplomatic intervention. Bulgarian conversion requirements were successfully eliminated, and Russian protection agreements were restored through coordinated international pressure. By 1876, merely 2 years after the final crusade was launched, Moses had successfully established the permanent institutional foundation for Jewish international advocacy. This structure possessed operational capabilities that would survive beyond his individual leadership, providing Jewish communities worldwide with systematic protection against persecution that coordinated anti-Semitic movements could not eliminate through pressure on individual governments. Jewish institutional development was guaranteed through complex international relationships that simultaneously served multiple government strategic interests, ensuring Jewish survival through permanent, systematized advocacy capabilities. The final crusade definitively demonstrated that Jewish survival in the rapidly modernizing world required a permanent institutional foundation for Jewish international advocacy, a structure capable of providing systematic protection against coordinated anti-Semitic persecution, while strategically serving international interests that guaranteed institutional survival beyond the lifespan of any individual humanitarian leader. From the blood-stained ledgers of the slave trade to the sacred sands of Jerusalem, today, the echoes of his signature on those 19th century ledgers are currently funding a medical revolution in the Bronx. The medical system founded in his honor on his 100th birthday, Montefiore Health System, recently made global headlines when it received a historic $1 billion donation. This gift made the Albert Einstein College of Medicine tuition free for all students in perpetuity. It is the ultimate legacy. Montefiore's name is no longer tied to the debts of the past, but to the boundless opportunities of future healers. This institutional legacy did not end with his death. It evolved into a global pillar of modern medicine and education. On his 100th birthday, New York synagogues founded the Montefiore Home for Chronic Invalids in his honor, an institution that has grown into the world-renowned Montefiore Medical Center. Today, it remains a leader in social medicine, recently receiving a historic $1 billion donation to make the Albert Einstein College of Medicine tuition free for all students in perpetuity. Sir Moses Montefiore didn't just write history with ink. He signed it with the survival of millions. The debt of the past is paid. The legacy of the future has just begun.